Chapter 1601–1625 Supremacy Games 1601. Both sides pushed to the extreme. Whoosh! Nemo's alter ego's body pierced through the air, tumbling uncontrollably at 1,000 times the speed of sound, smashing into the water tentacles, water beasts, and even some of the crystal platforms. However, Felix, bound by the still merging cores within them, found himself involuntarily flying after Nemo's alter ego. The connection between their cores created an invisible tether, pulling Felix along in the wake of his devastating attack. Felix didn't fight off the momentum and used it to his advantage to speed through the air, wanting to relentlessly press against Nemo's alter ego. The moment he reached him, Felix unleashed a torrent of punches and kicks, each infused with the pain and intensity of the merging process. Felix's onslaught was ferocious. His fists soared with a speed and power that blurred their motion, landing blow after blow on Nemo's alter ego. Each punch carried the weight of his determination and the accumulated agony he was going through. Nemo's alter ego seemed to allow this onslaught to carry on as his widened and bloodshot eyes were seen staring into the sky absent-mindedly. I got hit. I felt pain. Me? The paragon of sins? Against a puny mortal? Me. Thud. 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 The air around them was filled with the sounds of the battle, the thud of fists against the flesh, the whoosh of swift movements, and the occasional crack of impact. Felix moved like a storm, his attacks relentless and unyielding, taking advantage of all Nemo's alter ego's openings to cause him the most damage. Ugh! Yet, he was the one groaning with a slightly twisted expression as the harder he went on Nemo's alter ego, the worse the pain of the devouring process got. Yet, he toughened through it, gritting his teeth until sparks appeared, and continued his connection of fists/kicks to flesh. You can't stop me. No one can. With one final furious roar, a primal sound that echoed his torment and resolve, Felix executed a nasty round kick straight at Nemo's alter ego's face. Whoosh! He hurled him flying yet again through the air, leaving behind him a trail of blood. This time, Felix didn't keep up with his close combat, deciding to employ the full extent of his prearranged battlefield assets. He clapped his hands once as he yelled, "Ruin him!" At Felix's command, the water tentacles, which had been lying in wait, sprung into action. These massive, serpentine appendages, crafted from the very essence of water and imbued with Felix's will, surged toward Nemo's alter ego. They moved with surprising speed and agility, given their size and the viscous medium they were made of. Whoosh! The first tentacle struck, wrapping around Nemo's alter ego and hurling him into the air with tremendous force. Before he could recover, another tentacle whipped forward, catching him midair and smashing him back into the ocean. This was followed by a rapid succession of strikes from multiple tentacles, each one crashing Nemo's alter ego from different angles, disorienting and battering him with their sheer insane power. Each tentacle is crafted with condensed water particles and the ocean's pressure, making their hitting force equal to million tons of weight. Thor commentated while glancing at Elder Kraken, "You were never beaten in a water environment due to this exact technique." This was the reason Felix had picked an ocean environment. He was taught by Elder Kraken how to harness the sheer terror of the ocean's pressure and use it to his advantage by either extending it through tentacles like he was doing now or simply using it to self-implode anything or anyone in it. Simultaneously, Felix triggered the sniper rifles. These floating weapons, each enhanced with electrical rings and loaded with a lethal mix of destruction and Alhadi bullets, opened fire. The air filled with the sound of electric gunfire, a staccato symphony accompanying the assault of the tentacles. The bullets rained down on Nemo's alter ego, each shot aimed to exploit the openings created by the tentacles' barrage. Alhadi bullets exploded on impact, releasing waves of energy that tore at the fabric of Nemo's defenses while at the same time, giving Felix free force to absorb. Meanwhile, destruction bullets did absolutely no damage, making Felix understand that Nemo's alter ego must have wished to have temporary immunity against it. Unfazed by this, Felix waved his hand and a tentacle suddenly whipped Nemo's alter ego into the depths of the ocean, saving him from the bullet barrage, but putting him in a much more dangerous predicament. Get crashed! The tenants kept holding their breaths in astonishment and distress as they watched Felix concentrating the ocean's pressure on Nemo's alter ego. The ocean responded to Felix's will, its waters twisting and gathering momentum. In a display of elemental power, the water compressed around Nemo's alter ego, exerting an enormous pressure that would crush any ordinary being. However, the outcome was not as Felix anticipated. Instead of being crushed by the immense pressure, Nemo's alter ego's joints cracked and popped. It was like the insane pressure gave him a relieving massage. Before Felix could process this unforeseen turn of events, Nemo's alter ego's eyes snapped open, wide with rage, seemingly finally coming to terms with this humiliating experience. "You filthy peasant, you dared to lay your hands on me, you dared, you dared." At that moment, a powerful red aura enveloped his body, pulsating with raw, unbridled anger. It was clear that he wasn't harmed significantly or damaged by Felix's onslaught. In fact, he was more affected mentally than physically. Now, he had enough of messing around with Felix. He saw him before a mere ant and he tried to use his feet to stomp on him instead of using a blowtorch. But now, he realized that he needed an entire military tank to get the job done. "Rampage!" he roared, sending out a powerful shockwave through the ocean until it emerged from the surface as a shattering explosion. Following the bellow, a manifestation of his rage took form above his head, a formidable red dragon, its presence a symbol of his peak fury. The dragon, a creature of wrath and power, roared in tandem with Nemo, adding to the intensity of the moment. "Oh, your little boy is in a big trouble." The paragon chuckled as she tossed popcorn in her mouth. She didn't have to tell them, as everyone knew what this unfiltered level of rage signified. As they expected, it managed to trigger the final form of Rampage symbol, granting him an unprecedented boost to his strength, a staggering triple increase. Felix's expression wasn't pleasant in the slightest as he was told by the paragon that if their rage reached the limit, the symbol tripled down on the enhancement. It might not seem like much, but for beings at such a level, double the strength or triple, meant an increase of tens of millions at once. Now, Nemo's alter ego's strength was above 10 million BF, a level Felix could only dream of reaching. "There is still 30% for the devouring process to end, I can't have it end like this." Before Nemo's alter ego could make a move, Felix narrowed his eyes dangerously and brought out 5 of God's pillar potions, everything in his stock. "Felix, don't! That's an instant execution after the buff duration ends." Lady Sphinx warned him with a distressed tone, but alas, Felix ignored her and poured them down his throat at once. Instant execution? Felix knew that he would be executed right now and here. If he didn't do it, might as well bet on the odds after the duration ends. Ka-thum! The effect was immediate and intense. The potent liquid coursed through his veins, a surge of power that felt almost volcanic in its intensity. His muscles responded to the influx of energy, swelling and expanding at an astonishing rate, to the point that the fabric of his clothing strained and tore in places, unable to contain the burgeoning muscle mass beneath. Arg! Felix's skin became a canvas of pulsating power, with vivid green and red veins standing out prominently against his flesh. These veins throbbed with the potent mixture of the potion and his adrenaline, visibly transporting the enhanced energy throughout his body. Ka-thum! 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 Internally, Felix's 7 hearts kicked into overdrive. They beat with a ferocity and speed that would be unsustainable for any ordinary being. But it was a must, as this heightened cardiac activity was essential to manage the immense pressure building within his body, a pressure that made Felix feel as if he was teetering on the brink of self-implosion. The transformation left Felix feeling both immensely powerful and alarmingly volatile. Each movement he made was imbued with a strength that seemed to defy the laws of physics, yet he was acutely aware of the fine line he was walking. When Nemo saw and felt Felix's insane strength enhancement, which seemed to rival his own, his expression turned for the worse. F***ing vermin mortal. The things you have to do to mimic a fraction of my powers. Nemo's alter ego glanced at his core, which was slowly disappearing into a sneeze, and then glanced back at Felix. You pushed me into this, blame yourself. 1602 all out. The moment he finished his sentence, Felix glanced at the surface of the ocean above and his pupils couldn't help but thin at the sight of the 6 other forms of Nemo surrounding him from all directions. Each one received the same triple boost in strength, which meant, Felix wasn't going to be dealing with just one Nemo with above 10 million BF, but 7 of them. Yet this wasn't even the worst case scenario. The symbols, so many. Each form had 3 symbols activated above their head, some that Felix had recognized and some he had never seen before. I told you, your boy is in big trouble. The Paragon Lilith was the only one laughing inside the dead silent expanse of Felix's consciousness. Everyone else was watching with a hint of despair in their eyes, having no clue if it would be even possible for Felix to buy enough time for the last 30%. Suddenly. It seems like you have forgotten about me. Mother Siamese uttered coldly as she joined the fray. Recognizing the need for an intervention, she tapped into her deep reservoir of elemental energies. With a focused intensity, Mother Siamese's body started to shimmer and then, in a spectacular display of power, split into 6 distinct forms. Each form was a perfect replica of the original, yet each was surrounded by a unique and vivid aura. The first form was encased in an aura that seemed to warp and bend the light around it. The second form was enveloped in a pulsating, rhythmic aura, waves of energy rippled outwards from her, distorting the air and causing the ocean to tremble. Vibration element. Felix recognized the aura immediately as he could never forget his time with the vibration element in the spirit realm. Yet, the vibration element wasn't even the strangest aura of the bunch. One form glowed with a sinister, greenish hue. Another one was a chaotic swirling, ever-changing aura, an amalgam of colors and shapes that defied logic and reason. The fifth form crackled with a fiery, electric energy, and had swirling currents of superheated plasma, radiating intense heat and light. The last form was shrouded in a mystical, ethereal light, representing the element of ether, a rare and powerful energy that transcended the physical realm. Space, vibration, coas, radiation, plasma, and ether. Thor exclaimed, I never thought I would see most of the lost elements in play together. As the consciousness of an entire galaxy, all elements and laws of the universe were under her control inside her territory. Even the elements, which had never seen the day of the light in action due to their primogenitor's disappearance, were under her rulership. Felix, I will buy you some time. As she said this, 4 Mother Siamese's forms launched themselves at Nemo's forms. Just as Nemo's forms were about to clash with her forms, the Chaos Utilizer raised her hands, channeling the raw, untamed energy of chaos. With a focused intent, it unleashed the Chaos Warp ability, a power that bent the very fabric of reality itself. Each pair of forms ended up getting enveloped in a vortex of chaotic energy. The air around them was distorted and shimmered. With a sudden, disorienting lurch, each pair was pulled into a different reality, a separate dimension within the intricate maze of a million layers of dimensions that she had created before. Even when Nemo's alter ego had space element immunity, he couldn't resist the chaos teleportation ability since it bent reality to achieve its target instead of using spatial particles. In these new, isolated realities, each pair was seen standing in front of each other with cold expressions. The separation was jarring for the Sin forms, each now forced to confront its elemental adversary. To make matters worse, they found themselves in a dimension uniquely tailored to empower 4 Mother Siamese's elements while weakening theirs. The vibration form battled in a dimension where the very ground and air pulsate with constant, disorienting tremors. The radiation form was in a realm filled with a glowing, toxic fog that dulled senses and sapped strength. The plasma form engaged in a fiery, storm-ridden world where plasma bolts rained from the sky. The ether form confronted its foe in a surreal, dreamlike landscape where the laws of physics seemed twisted and fluid. The space form grappled in a dimension of warped gravity and spatial anomalies. Still, Nemo's alter ego was more irritated by this than scared. Useless efforts. He sneered while cancelling his wrath symbol responsible for his forms, causing them to disappear from the prepared dimensions. He instantly used it again. This resulted in their creation right next to him, voiding all of Four Mother Siamese's efforts without wasting a single wish in the process. But neither Four Mother Siamese nor Felix were put in despair by this. Four Mother Siamese brought back her forms into the battle just as easily and sent them against his forms again, attempting to use the same strategy. This made Nemo's alter ego understand that those two main purposes were to waste his time and eventually cause his core to be devoured. So, he no longer cared about saving his energy or worrying about what would happen to him if he didn't have the price to pay for his wishes. He looked at them dead in the eyes and wished out loud with the most sinister tone any of them had heard before. I wish to be invincible from all effects and damages in this battle. The water stilled for a moment as the weight of his words settled over the battlefield. The implications of such a wish were immense, promising to tilt the balance of the fight dramatically and instantly. Felix, upon hearing the wish, felt a surge of frustration mixed with despair. He always knew that there was the possibility of Nemo's alter ego voicing such an overbearing wish. After all, Felix's immunity simply worked on wishes related to the core and himself. Nemo could easily desire for anything as long as those two conditions were respected. You actually went for it, aren't you worried about the consequences? Felix asked, trying his best to buy time. Too bad, his attempt was ignored as Nemo's alter ego straight out punched him in the face under his other forms, activating their sins symbols. Supreme symbol, Clash of Pride symbol, Hunger symbol, Origin symbol, Dream World symbol, Perfect Imitation symbol, Temptation symbol, and the list goes on and on. As these symbols activated, the battlefield became a landscape of chaos and despair. All other 6 forms turned into humanoid forms and lunged at Felix simultaneously, converging on him in a relentless assault. Boredom! 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 Felix, usually a beacon of strength and strategy, found himself getting demolished under their supreme strength. Each of Nemo's shapes brought its unique brand of devastation. The Pride form struck with overwhelming confidence and power, each blow more forceful than the last. The Sloth form ensnared Felix in tendrils of lethargy, slowing his movements and reactions. Envy mirrored Felix's fighting style, turning it against him in a cruel twist of fate. Lust bombarded him with waves of emotional turmoil, using threats and tempting promises mixed in with his attacks. Gluttony attempted to drain his energy with each contact, using the power of a symbol called Drain Touch. Felix tried to defend himself, countering with all the skill and power at his disposal. But for every move he made, the sin shapes had a counter, their combined assault leaving him no room to breathe or plan. His body bore the brunt of their relentless attacks, each hit taking its toll, pushing him to his limits. Meanwhile, Four Mother Siamese watched with growing desperation as her attempts to aid Felix proved futile. Her elemental shapes lashed out with their respective powers, trying to shield Felix, attack the sin forms, or at least create some opening for Felix to recover. But after Nemo's alter ego wished for invincibility, her once formidable elemental abilities now glanced off harmlessly, unable to make any meaningful impact. The sight of her powers, which could once bend the forces of nature to her will, being rendered so ineffective was a bitter pill to swallow. Four Mother Siamese's frustration and concern mounted with each passing moment. She moved with frantic energy, trying strategy after strategy, but nothing seemed to work as Nemo's alter ego's shapes completely dismissed her existence. In the end, she channeled all of her powers into either healing Felix or shielding him, wanting to help mitigate some of the damage just by a little. Nemo's alter ego wasn't having it any better as he was wakened at last to the harsh reality. My sin's effects aren't working on him. How does he possess sin's immunities? Is that why my wishes haven't worked before? Even though Nemo's alter ego was slaughtering Felix, treating him like a soulless doll, he started to get agitated and angered after realizing that most of his sin's effects were failing. His drain touch didn't absorb anything, his lust's temptation missed and control made him seem like a rambling madman. The clash of prides failed to accept Felix as a target, his envy's second symbol, a perfect imitation, failed to copy Felix's abilities and powers, Dream World's symbol failed to put Felix into slumber, and the list goes on. 90% of symbols targeting Felix directly turned out to be utterly useless and merely there to waste Nemo's alter ego's energy. Nemo's alter ego was fighting with purely 10% of his symbols, which were affecting him personally, like the Supreme symbol, Hunger symbol, and Rampage symbol. You must have used that little runt to desire for them. No wonder I feel his presence on the brink of disappearance. After I am through with you, I will make sure to teach him a grave lesson for all the bullshit he put me through because of you. 1603 All Out. 2. Nemo's alter ego spoke with a disgusted tone as he kept raining down empowered punches at Felix, beating him senselessly. In his eyes, it would take just a bit more time to finish off Felix without his symbol's effects since he was getting stronger and stronger with each second passing. Die! Die! Die already, you cockroach! Nemo's alter ego cursed as he hurled him into the air with a powerful uppercut, only for the envy form to catch him mid-fall and slam him back against a massive water beast with a thunderous blow. However, Felix didn't suffer the whole amount of damage as his passive absorbed most of the force while another significant portion got eaten by Mother Siamese's metallic shield. I am with you, Felix, don't you dare give up! Mother Siamese yelled in Felix's mind as she worked tirelessly to protect him with all types of barriers and shields. After witnessing Nemo's alter ego's overwhelming strength and dreadful personality, she knew that her fate wouldn't end well if he managed to walk away from them. Alas, her support wasn't really that optimal as her abilities ended up not reaching their ultimate form due to the origin/hunger symbols, absorbing neutral energy constantly and breaking apart her abilities. While Mother Siamese was the goddess of this galaxy, she was still a rank lower than Nemo, which meant that his symbol effects would always override her abilities. Because of this, Nemo's alter ego didn't bother investing any time in her and continued putting everything he had on Felix. Whoosh! Whoosh! Boredom! Boredom! As the beating continued, Felix's body became a canvas of bruises and wounds, blood seeped from multiple injuries, staining the ocean beneath him. With each successive hit, his body glowed brighter and brighter, a visible sign of the force being absorbed into the cracks of his skin. Alas, Felix didn't have an ounce of energy to lift a finger as he felt like his entire body was put into a meat grinder, don't even mention retaliating back. His body was indestructible all right, but this indestructibility didn't mean that he couldn't get injured or harmed, it just meant that his body would always remain intact regardless of the force it went through. In other words, Felix could die purely from pain even if his body was still intact since his soul and mind didn't enjoy the same immunity. Meanwhile, the tenants, witnessing this brutal scene, were overcome with a mix of anger, frustration, and hopelessness. They watched as their child was battered and beaten, feeling each hit as if it were their own. Their fists clenched, their jaws tightened, and their eyes burned with a mix of rage and sorrow. Forgive me, son, forgive me for being weak. Ramongandra said with a rough voice. It tears at my soul to see him like this. Thor pulled his fists until blood seeped out of his palms. Lady Sphinx merely closed her eyes and remained silent, listening to her student's muffled anguished groans, and the soft cracks of his soul barrier, implying his incoming damnation. The majority of the tenants were unable to do anything else but listen and watch. Everyone expected the battle to be difficult, to be tough, to be extremely challenging for Felix, but none of them were ready for the scene before them. Most of them wanted nothing more than to rush into the fray, to stand by Felix and fight off the onslaught, but the reality of their situation held them back. They knew that intervening could potentially make things worse or even lead to their downfall since Nemo's alter ego could easily capture them with his spiritual pressure and use them as hostages. Felix, there is only 20% left, you can do it, you can, sob it. Candace wept as she encouraged him, alas, if only she believed in her own words, as her expression was that of utter despair. She knew, no, they knew, that 20% meant that Felix still had to endure at least 10 more seconds of this horrific slaughter. 10 seconds in this battle was like 10 hours. Meanwhile, Felix didn't hear anything they said, as his mind was completely shut off and his consciousness flickered in and out with the ebb and flow of pain, barely holding it in. Each punch, each kick, sent waves of agony through him, threatening to pull him under into darkness, but amidst this torture, images of Asna and Nimmo appeared before his eyes. As, N.A. I'm, Ko. Ming, I, Pro, Meist, I, Pro, Meist, her. These images served as anchors, pulling him back from the brink of unconsciousness. Asna's face, a reminder of love and the life they've shared, instilled him with resolve. Nimmo's face jumped in once in a while in his mind with his cute squealing and always excited attitude. They were the beacons in his storm of pain, the reasons he refused to succumb. How could he, after both of them willingly gave themselves for his sake? They had already shown him their indomitable loyalty and untouched love, it was his time to demonstrate his own. Meanwhile, deep within the tranquil expanse of an ancient forest, far removed from the chaos and tumult of the battlefield, sat a small, cozy house. It was a place of solitude and peace, nestled among towering trees and whispering leaves. Here resided Lord Zervan, whose very presence seemed to resonate with the timeless nature of the woods around him. Inside, Lord Zervan sat in a comfortable chair, his gaze turned towards the sky visible through a nearby window, his eyes, deep and knowing, glittered with the accumulated wisdom of eons and the ability to see far beyond the ordinary. As he stared into the sky, a wry grin played on his lips. He was a solitary figure, yet there was a sense of connection about him, as if he was attuned to events and emotions far from his tranquil abode. In a soft, reflective voice, he spoke, his words carrying the weight of understanding and a touch of melancholy. "The things you do for love, the things we do to not be lonely," he mused, his voice barely louder than a whisper. "I wish that the path you have chosen was a bit easier, Felix, but alas." Lord Zervan's words trailed off as he continued to gaze skyward. His expression was one of empathy and a deep, almost parental concern. He understood the trials and tribulations that come with the paths chosen for love and companionship, the sacrifices made, and the loneliness that beings like himself often endured. At this moment, Lord Zervan seemed to be both a distant observer and a deeply connected participant in the events unfolding far away. Meanwhile, with muddled, disorientated, blood-filled eyes, Felix was also staring at the sky high above after getting smashed from the back. At that moment, Asna and Nimmo's faces appeared on the clouds. "I wo, ntlet.y.ou, d, own." The instant he saw them, a tiny grin manifested on his shattered and bruised face. It wasn't a grin of joy or victory, but one of resilience, a silent testament to his unyielding spirit and determination to survive this at all cost. He smiled. "You smiled." Nimmo's alter ego caught sight of this unexpected smile, and it struck a deep and infuriating chord within him. His eyes blazed with an unhinged rage, the sight of Felix's grin acting as a catalyst for his already simmering anger. To him, it was not just a smile, it was a symbol of his failure to break Felix, a mockery of his efforts, and an unbearable affront to his ego as a god. And thus, he finally snapped. 1604 all out. 3. I dare you to smile after this. In a fit of uncontrollable fury, Nimmo's alter ego decided to resort to his most drastic and destructive measure yet. He brought his 7 forms all around Felix, forming a circle around him. Then, he bellowed, "Energy implosion." An orange symbol with intricate inscriptions manifested above all of the 7 forms, representing the gluttony sin. When the tenants saw this symbol, all of them turned to the paragon Lilith and asked simultaneously with furious looks, "You never told us about this one either." During the battle, they had seen a couple of newer symbols, but because of Felix's immunities, their effects never manifested properly. They didn't say anything at that time to the paragon Lilith, but they couldn't hold back any longer after seeing another foreign symbol emerge. Who could blame them for their reaction? The Paragon Lilith had assured everyone that Nemo's alter ego wouldn't possess any symbol she hadn't shown them. "Ah, I kinda forgot about this one, ops, I guess." The Paragon Lilith chuckled with an unbothered expression. She couldn't care less about their frustration or anger, and the tenants knew that it was their fault for believing that she wanted Felix to win this if just by a little. Suddenly, their focus was forced back on the battle after seeing the air around Nemo's forms shudder and turn chaotic, making their appearance destabilized while their energies turned erratic and volatile. If it wasn't for Nemo's alter ego wishing for temporary invincibility, he would have never gone so far as to deal with a mortal. Alas, drastic situations call for drastic measures. As the energy implosion symbol activated fully, an ominous tremor ran through the very fabric of the dimension. It was subtle at first, a mere whisper of movement, but it rapidly grew into a violent shudder that disrupted everything within this once stable reality. The vast ocean, previously a serene expanse of water, began to churn and roil as if caught in an unseen storm. Waves rose to towering heights, crashing against each other with a force that seemed to defy the natural order. The sky above twisted and distorted, the colors bleeding and swirling as if the very air was rebelling against its usual form. "Oh no!" For Mother Siamese, sensing the catastrophic potential of the unfolding chaos, sprung into action with a petrified expression. She called upon her vast elemental powers, attempting to impose order on the escalating disorder. Her forms worked in unison, each channeling their specific energies to stabilize the dimension. They pushed against the growing tide of chaos, trying to mend the fabric of space and time that the implosion symbol was tearing apart. "I can't stop it, his symbol overrides my control." But as she battled to save the dimension, For Mother Siamese realized the futility of her efforts. The particles that made up the very essence of the dimension were becoming erratic and destructive. They vibrated with an intensity that grew more frenzied by the moment, a clear sign that the entire dimensional structure was on the brink of annihilation. It was then that she sensed the impending doom, and all she could do was use everything in her power to create a barrier around Felix. Alas! The 6 forms of Nemo's alter ego, already destabilized by the symbol's activation, became the epicenter of the disaster. Boom! 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 One by one, they exploded in a series of blinding flashes, each detonation more violent than the last. These explosions were not merely the end of the sin forms but the catalyst for the true implosion. Boom! The dimension convulsed as the implosion took full effect, the ocean evaporated in an instant, and the water particles disintegrated into nothingness, the ground cracked and crumbled, the very earth disintegrating under the force of the implosion. The sky shattered like glass, the fragments of reality swirling into the vortex of destruction at the heart of the implosion. This catastrophic event didn't stop at a single dimension, the shockwave rippled outwards, reaching the millions of layered unnatural dimensions above it. Each layer had vibrated, then shook, and finally collapsed, unable to withstand the domino effect of the implosion. The boundaries between dimensions blurred and then disintegrated, each explosion feeding the next in a chain reaction of annihilation. In the end, there was nothing left but the void. A vast, empty expanse where once there had been layers upon layers of reality. For Mother Siamese, having witnessed the obliteration of everything around her, and the disappearance of Felix and Nemo's alter ego, felt a profound sense of loss and despair. She knew that somewhere in the void, Felix and Nemo's alter ego remained, as none of them could be destroyed by this implosion. Even if Felix by some miracle survived the implosion and remained conscious, he was now situated in Nemo's alter ego home ground without any backup. "We are done for, we lost." She could only close her eyes and let out a deep sigh. In the meantime, Felix and Nemo's alter ego found themselves adrift in the vast, pitch darkness of the void. Felix's body was a beacon in the oppressive darkness of the void, glowing like a celestial body with an intensity that dwarfed even the sun. The force of the explosions from the dimensional collapse, rather than destroying him, had been absorbed into his body, causing him to shine 1,000 times brighter. Nemo's alter ego, in contrast, was a dark silhouette against the backdrop of Felix's brilliance. "I can't believe this, how can you still be alive after that? What the hell is pushing you to keep clinging to life this f***ing hard?" Nemo's alter ego completely ignored the blinding brilliance and caught Felix by the neck, shaking his head with intense fervor and a tint of fear. How could he not be a bit scared when he could see that his core was merely 10% away from being devoured while his enemy, a mortal, refused to die or even pass out? "I blew millions of dimensions and you were in the heart of it. Why won't you die already?" His emotional roars weren't befitting for a Unigen at all, but at this moment, he had the ability to be excused, as no one could remain composed after all of this. Felix remained silent. It wasn't like he ignored him, but he simply couldn't hear him. He was already adrift inside his inner dark and empty subconscious. Asna, Nemo, and his loved ones, who were keeping him going the entire time, were nowhere to be seen. The light in his eyes commenced to fade away, a contrast to his brilliant glow. His consciousness was at last dying out just like a candle at its last drop of wax, and nothing had the ability to bring it back anymore, not even the power of love. He was still a human and humans had their limitations no matter how much he made it seem like he was limitless. "Ha ha, ha ha ha, you had me worried for a second there." After sensing Felix losing consciousness at last, Nemo's alter ego laughed out loud as he enabled go of him. "I really thought I was about to use my territorial pressure to finish you off, that would be the most humiliating experience in my life." Still, no response. Crack. 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 Meanwhile, the tenants bore witness to a scene that filled them with dread and sorrow. They watched, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and desperation, as Felix's soul barrier, the last line of defense protecting his very essence, commenced to crack and fracture. "Felix! No! No! Please! No! Sob, please!" Candace cried out loud while flying to the soul barrier, trying her best to keep it from breaking apart, but alas, at this point, not even Lord Hades had the ability to help Felix. His soul was beyond redemption after everything he put it through. He had the ability to revive him after his death, but a break must happen first. And the saga concludes. Lord Shiva sighed as he sealed his manga book on the last page. 1605 Choosing the Lesser Evil. The barrier, once a luminous and robust shield enveloping Felix's soul, was now riddled with fissures and spiderweb cracks. Each line that marred its surface was a testament to the brutal and relentless assault it had endured. The light that it radiated was flickering and dimming, a stark indication of its weakening state. Lady Sphinx and the others had witnessed the barrier being tested and strained before, but it had always held firm, a reliable bastion. But now, as they watched the cracks spread and deepen, they understood the chilling reality: if the barrier collapsed, it would signify the end of Felix. His soul, the very core of his being, would be erased by Nemo's alter ego, leaving nothing behind but a void. A heavy silence hung over the tenants as they stood powerless to intervene. The weight of impending loss bore down upon them, each crack in the barrier a cruel countdown to an outcome they were desperate to prevent. They exchanged somber looks, their faces edged with grief and a profound sense of helplessness. Words were unnecessary, their expressions spoke volumes about the deep bond they shared with Felix and the pain of watching him approach the brink of annihilation. While everyone was gloomy and seemed to have accepted Felix's fate, the Paragon Lilith reached out to her popcorn bucket and found nothing in it. I'm out of popcorn at the finale, still, it was indeed a fun watch," she said while stretching her arms behind her back like a lazy cat waking up from a nap. Then, she looked at everyone's depressed looks and chuckled, "I guess it's time to put an end to the show. He should be ready now." With a single thought, the Paragon Lilith had invaded the expanse of Felix's subconsciousness, a realm where thoughts and memories drift like phantoms in the dark. Felix, whose consciousness teetered on the edge of an everlasting slumber, lay adrift in the sea of his mind. His spirit, battered and weary from the relentless battle, was moments away from succumbing to the darkness that sought to claim it. In this critical juncture between being and nothingness, Lilith found him. With a gentle yet assertive touch, Lilith reached out to Felix's fading spirit, her presence a catalyst for awakening. "Wake up if you desire to save your loved one," she called, her voice echoing through the shadows. At her call, something within Felix stirred. A flicker of awareness, dim and distant, initiated to grow, fighting back against the encroaching void. His soul, recognizing the voice and the lifeline it offered, clung to it, pulling him back from the brink of oblivion. As Felix's consciousness slowly rekindled, his ethereal form materialized before Lilith. His eyes, once dull and fading, now looked upon her with a mixture of confusion and recognition. "Paragon," he murmured, his voice a mere whisper in the dark. The Paragon Lilith stared at him with an unfathomable expression, her eyes reflecting a depth of knowledge and purpose, a complete opposite to the playful persona she had on display. "I can make all of this go away. I can help you win your battle against that raccoon, but I need something from you," she said. Felix, even while he was still grasping the threads of his returning awareness, replied with a cold tone, "You finally decided to make your move? What is it that you seek?" Lilith's gaze intensified, and she spoke with a deliberate emphasis, "All I require is for my soul to reside within Asna's core." "You?" Felix was left utterly stunned, feeling chills running down his spirit. He always knew that the Paragon Lilith desired something from him. She was participating in this turning point of his life either directly or indirectly from the very start. Yet, not in his wildest dreams did he expect her goal to be residence in Asna's core. "Before you reject me, you have to comprehend something," the Paragon Lilith mentioned calmly. "You can either accept my request and help me fulfill it, allowing us both to gain something from this, or you can drop dead, and I will harvest it from your body after the raccoon separates his core with hers. Either way, I am getting what I want." A heavy silence fell over Felix's subconscious realm as he processed her words. The request was significant, and the implications were far-reaching and unknown. Asna's core was not just a toy or a source of power, it was a deeply personal and sacred part of their partnership. She trusted him with her core and now he was being asked to let another soul reside within it. What would happen to Asna then? Will it still be considered her core? Even if he agreed to her request and she helped him finish off the battle, what would assure his survival from her? In his eyes, it was too risky, too unpredictable, and too dangerous for both himself and Asna. But at the same time, his other option wasn't any better: death, losing Asna's core for real, and the end of his saga forever. Even while Felix had no idea what was going on outside, he was certain that his soul was on the brink of destruction and he had almost no time to dwell on his decision, which was the perfect scenario for the Paragon. "You waited until I exhausted all of my options and luck before appearing in front of me. I don't know how long were you planning for this, thousands of years, millions of years, or even billions of years. But, your patience is remarkable." While it sounded like praise, Felix's cold tone made it clear that he didn't think so. "I know you are mad, I know you are afraid, and I know you are desperate to take my hand and seek out a silver lining in this situation. So, let me make it easier for you to decide." The Paragon Lilith smiled gently as she said, "Me residing in Asna's core won't affect you or her negatively, you will comprehend later on why so. Most importantly, I don't want you dead as you will be my only ride to my freedom. For now, make a decision quickly and we will discuss the details after you live through this." The Paragon Lilith tapped on her wrist and said, "You have less than 5 milliseconds before your soul's collapse and the core's separation." Felix, now fully conscious and aware of the gravity of the situation, realized the choice before him. On one hand, was the promise of salvation from Lilith, a new chance to carry on his mission. On the other was the uncertainty and the potential risk involved in intertwining Lilith's soul with Asna's core. Felix wasn't dumb to trust her words after she pulled this on him, but at the same time, it was a slight reassurance, even when he already made his decision the moment she offered her hand. As she said, He might be scared, but he was desperate, and there was no way he would turn down the only remaining chance in front of him to save Asna. One question before we commit to this. Felix frowned, why do you need me? In his mind, his existence shouldn't be that important since she would be getting Asna's core from Nemo's hands anyway when he died. So, why go through all of this trouble? For my soul to reside in her core, the host needs to approve of it. The Paragon Lilith gave a short explanation, if I tried to do it while the core has no host, it will reject me, and not even a wish can make a difference. While the explanation was short, Felix understood what she implied. Asna's core was like a safe and he was the only one given the keys to it, unless Asna approved of the Paragon of Sins to enter her core, there was no other way around it besides receiving Felix's help. When Felix's thought process went down this path, a sudden horrifying realization struck him akin to a thunderbolt. He lifted his shaky finger and pointed at the Paragon. It can't be, no, don't tell me, you. He stuttered with a look of utter fear and shock. You are a smart one, you found out quite late though, with 3 milliseconds remaining, what's your call? The Paragon Lilith showed a faint charming smile as she told him the time, but in Felix's eyes, her smile seemed sinister like the devil himself was smiling at him. The revelation he figured out was so horrifying, it gave Felix a new understanding of what it meant to be the pinnacle of evil. Yet, I agree. 1606 A laugh, bitter and tinged with despair. In the vast, oppressive darkness of the void, where Felix and Nemo's alter ego remained locked in their merging process, a sudden, subtle shift occurred the moment Felix gave his confirmation. From the background of the void, a pair of eyes opened, not just any eyes, but those of the Paragon Lilith. They resembled two vast, shimmering pink galaxies, swirling with an otherworldly light that pierced through the encompassing darkness. She seemed near, yet far, a close resemblance to her relationship with this situation. The Paragon Lilith blinked once, and in that brief moment of closing and reopening, her eyes vanished, leaving behind nothing but the void's impenetrable darkness. But her disappearance was not without effect. Almost immediately, Felix's body reacted, an ethereal presence, the soul of the Paragon Lilith had invaded him. Now, it was confirmed that she was always near, like she had predicted the end of the battle to occur in the void. Meanwhile, no one seemed to have noticed the invasion. The tenant's eyes were frozen in time as they stared at Felix's crumbling soul barrier. The only one who noticed her entry was Lord Hades. Yet, he neither spoke nor acted to stop her. Unlike the others, he was listening to Felix's conversation with the Paragon Lilith inside the subconscious space. Was my theory wrong? I always knew that there can't be two Unigens with the same core, and she had a massive part in this, but was she the sole person responsible for all of this? I know how shrewd and intelligent she is, but still, this perfect planning seems a bit above her league. Lord Hades thought to himself as he watched the Paragon's soul penetrate Asna's core after Felix gave her access. As the Paragon's soul went inside Asna's core, a power surge rippled through Felix. It was a confluence of energies, both ancient and potent. The core, already a beacon of strength and resilience, now pulsed with an added dimension of power. What's that? You felt it too? It felt like it came from the cores. This time, the tenants felt it, and even Felix's fading consciousness seemed to be rekindled from the power surge. While his deadpan pupils seemed to have some life return to them, the Paragon Lilith had manifested a celestial throne, an ethereal and magnificent seat that seemed to be crafted from the very fabric of the cosmos right in the center of Asna's core. Asna's core was similar to Felix's consciousness space, besides the fact the consciousness lake's area was dried up completely and the entire space seemed to be made out of milky white marble. With an air of regal composure and a satisfied smile playing on her lips, the Paragon Lilith slowly lowered herself onto the throne, her eyes fixed on the spectacle before her. At last, my patience has been rewarded. Lilith, sitting upon her celestial throne with the core, exuded a sense of triumph and contentment as if all the pieces of her intricate plan were falling into place. Enough celebration for now, I can't have my soul ticket to freedom expire on its first day. Her gaze, sharp and calculating, turned to Nemo's alter ego, who seemed completely shocked after spotting Felix regaining his consciousness. Then, with a voice that resonated with authority and finality, she declared, "That's enough." At her words, a profound shift occurred. Nemo's alter ego's furious and hate-filled expression suddenly went blank, his features slackening as if the intense emotions that once drove him had been extinguished. In the next instant, his face commenced to morph, his features reshaping to resemble a more serious and cold persona, one that mirrored none other than the paragon of sins, Lilith. After the tenants saw this, none of them uttered a single word, they simply gazed at the paragon of sins with widened pupils and their souls freezing all over. As for Felix, when he gazed through cloudy, muddled eyes at the metamorphosis of Nemo's alter ego, the reality of the situation slowly seeped into his mind, filling him with despair and a growing sense of helplessness. His mind, already teetering on the brink from the relentless assault and the strain of the merging process, struggled to accept this turn of events. How did Nemo's alter ego, whom he had locked for thousands of years and even helped hatch personally, end up to be the paragon herself? Was she always there ever since he hatched Nemo? Was Nemo's cute version also part of her plans? Was his relationship with Nemo a lie, a mere ploy to fulfill her agendas? Was all of this a mere lie? Ha ha. The thought was inconceivable, a twist in the tale that not even Felix, with all his experience and knowledge, could have anticipated. As these thoughts swirled chaotically in his mind, something within Felix snapped. A single tear fell down his cheek after his entire collection of memories with Nemo shattered right before his eyes, and then... Ha ha ha, wellpla yed ha, ha, you ha ve, complete. EY1. A laugh, bitter and tinged with despair, erupted from him. It was a sound that resonated with the absurdity of the situation and the overwhelming sense of futility that enveloped him. This laugh was not one of amusement but a release of all the pent-up tension, disbelief, and ridicule he felt at this bewildering ending. But as quickly as the laugh came, it faded. The mental exertion of processing this revelation, on top of the physical and emotional toll of the battle, was too much for Felix to bear. His strength, both mental and physical, ebbed away, leaving him teetering on the edge of consciousness. And then, with a final flicker of awareness, Felix succumbed to the darkness. His eyes, once a window to his determined soul, clouded over completely as he slipped back into the void of unconsciousness. The last image that haunted his mind before the blackness claimed him was the paragon of sins in Nemo's body, giving him her usual charming but deadly sinister smile. "I can't have you die on me now." When Lilith saw this scene, she snapped her finger with a casual flick of her wrist, and Nemo's alter ego's core, which had been resisting the merge with every fiber of its being, suddenly ceased its struggle like an obedient little boy. Instead, it began to welcome the merge, embracing it openly and fully. The speed of the merging process accelerated dramatically, increasing 100-fold as Asna's core devoured it whole. The instant the process ended, Felix's body, battered and floating aimlessly, commenced to show the first signs of recovery. Felix's soul, which had been on the brink of eternal darkness, commenced to recover at an astonishing rate. It was as if the universe itself had blessed him, breathing new life into his very essence. The soul's luminous barrier, once dim and cracked, now pulsed with renewed vigor and brightness. Each pulse was stronger than the last, rapidly restoring Felix to his former vitality and beyond. Simultaneously, Felix's physical form underwent a subtle yet profound transformation. As his body slowly regenerated, his crimson hair grew longer, flowing down his back like a river of blood. His skin took on a slightly tanner hue, the color of ancient, sun-kissed earth, speaking of endurance and resilience. Most remarkably, the royal gemstones that had once adorned his body commenced to meld within his skin, dissolving into his very being. In place of the gemstones, an intricate tattoo emerged across his chest. The tattoo was a masterpiece of design and symbolism, featuring the 7 sins symbols inked beneath a complex pattern that declared of power, struggle, and betrayal. Each symbol of the sins was rendered with exquisite detail, a permanent reminder of the struggle he had endured and the forces he had confronted. Yet, even when his soul and form were healed, Felix's consciousness was nowhere to be seen. He remained floating amidst nothingness akin to a broken doll. Meanwhile, the once fiercely independent and destructive core of the Paragon had settled, transforming into a pitch-black star amidst the celestial landscape of Asna's core. It was a striking image, the dark star a stark contrast to the vibrant energy surrounding it, yet somehow in harmony. Sitting on her celestial throne, the main orchestrator of this cosmic drama dusted her smooth palms and leaned against the throne with a relaxed smile. Suddenly, she chuckled as she created a red apple and bit a big chunk of it, leaving its juices seeping down her plump violet lips and sharp chin. And with that, my fate has been decided and those old fogies are going to hate me with every fiber of their being, he, I so dearly wish to be there. 1607 The Three Rulers' Reaction. Her assumption wasn't far off from the truth as the three rulers had been spectating the entire battle from the start to its end. Right now, the three celestial rulers sat on their respective platforms in the grand assembly hall of the cosmos, a place where the very fabric of reality seemed to bow and weave at the will of its occupants. None of them seemed to have the will to speak, leaving a heavy, profound stillness that seemed to resonate with the gravity of the moment. The three rulers, beings of incomprehensible power and wisdom, sat motionless, their gazes fixed on a large, ethereal mirror that floated before them. The mirror's surface rippled with images. They witnessed the relentless assault, the transformation of Nemo's alter ego, the intervention of the Paragon of Sins, and the dramatic conclusion with the merging of the cores. As the final scene played out, the mirror showed Felix, now transformed, his body radiating with the absorbed energy and marked with the symbols of the sins. The Paragon of Sins in Nemo's form gently picked up Felix's transformed form and began to descend into the depths of the void realm. As she disappeared with Felix into the darkness, the mirror's surface gradually cleared, returning to its natural, reflective state. The silence in the assembly hall lingered for a moment longer, a silent acknowledgement of the significance of what they had just witnessed. Then, one of the rulers finally broke the silence, his voice resonating with a mixture of anger and frustration. I knew she was up to no good, but I never thought her end goal was this. This just complicated our plans. With Lilith's core devoured, and her main soul residing inside Asna's core, the universe will see it as there is no Paragon of Sins in existence and will most definitely ascend the boy to the new position. The three rulers understood this subject more than anyone in existence. No one figured out how the universe operated better than them, and in this exact scenario, they knew that Felix would become the new Paragon of Sins the instant he broke through to the origin realm. Before, there might have been a chance of the ascension failing even with the core in hand and the foundation set. That's because Lilith's soul was still out there and she was the genuine Paragon of Sins. The universe could not skip over her like that. Lord Hades never told Felix about this, but the final step of their ascension plan was to defeat the Paragon of Sins Lilith. Obviously, there was no way Felix could defeat her with his current setup. However, if he managed to defeat Nemo and broke through the origin realm, he would possess strength similar to a false newborn Unigen without a title. The only way to become the real Paragon of Sins was by removing Lilith from the picture, which would allow the universe to bestow Felix with the title and the rest of the role's gifts and powers. In a sense, the Paragon Lilith had helped Felix avoid all of this and to straight out rise and become the Paragon of Sins, which was 10 times better since the ascension would be natural. But, the price was way too steep for such an opportunity. Based on what she did to the universe's heart, her goal is still the same, freedom to the other side. The first ruler said with a deep tone as he gazed at the small white dot inside the celestial energy mist. She changed her method and decided to invest in the boy to make it to the other side. The second ruler nodded with a soft tone, being inside Asna's core is the best way to see through this, we can't touch her, we can't banish her, and most importantly, she will soon break free from the universal shackles of her guardianship role. She went all out on this and has been preparing for a very long time for it. She has even shown us on many occasions her wishes to return to the upper celestial realm for almost 1 billion years now, baiting us to believe her reformation and bestow this prepared opportunity to her. The third ruler said with a cold tone. Everything is too perfectly planned for at least 1 billion years now. She must have used her greed laws to wish to know the best possibility of her freedom, and this is what has come up to her. With greed laws in hand, seeing into the future wasn't difficult if the price could be afforded. So, it wasn't far-fetched to believe that the paragon Lilith had seen the future and made her plans to shape it to her benefit. It might have been easier to question Cronus about this, but he is still slumbering after linking Asna's soul with that boy's and sending them back to the past in a new timeline. The second ruler sighed, we have imprisoned him for this kind of power abuse, and when we finally released him, he pulled the same crap. It's best if he remains asleep forever. As the sole unigen of time/space, he was considered the clock of the universe, the master of timelines, and one of the few unigens capable of actually affecting everyone's lives, unigens included. So, even the smallest action of his would result in a significant punishment from the universe. True, the universe's heart has been spewing fewer and fewer celestial energy lately. We can't afford to waste it on banishing him or anyone at a unigen's level. The third ruler shook his head in displeasure. If they were able to afford to waste celestial energy, they wouldn't have bothered to use the paragon Lilith to retrieve the core no matter how much she tried to bait them. They might have opened the gate and sent another unigen in the upper celestial echelons to finish the job. Unfortunately, both the opening of the gate and the unigen descending required a significant amount of energy to sustain his power level. Lord Hades and the paragon Lilith never had issues with sustaining themselves because they own entire realms mirroring the cosmos itself. So, while they didn't have access to celestial energy, the quantity of elemental energy in their realm was more than enough. But the same didn't apply to the rest of the unigens. Not every unigen had a realm under their name to guard and feed them constantly in the universe, which made them forced to create their own in the eternal kingdom. So, if they descended to the universe, their link to celestial energy/elemental energy from their territories in the eternal kingdom might be cut off, and they wouldn't have any similar quality of energy down here to offset it. While this might cause their strength to weaken significantly, returning to its normal base, any of them was still powerful enough to finish off Felix with a mere glance. Luckily for him, the price to do this was too much for the three rulers at that moment, forcing them to bet their chances on the paragon. What's done is done, we lost the battle, but not the war. The first ruler uttered calmly, Lilith has bound herself with the boy, and she knows that if she wants her freedom, she has to come all the way here with him. In other words, the core was going to be brought to them on a silver plate even if they didn't do anything. After all, both Asna and the universe's heart were in this pocket dimension, which was considered the most secure area in the entire eternal kingdom. Just to reach this place was a challenge on its own, as even unigens don't have access to it. Only the ones in the upper celestial echelon could enter this place for a limited period. So, you are saying we do nothing? Doing nothing is doing something. The first ruler said composedly, let them come to us, and by then, we will have collected enough celestial energy and possess both Asna's and Lilith's cores to give our plan a second chance. I do you one better. The second ruler displayed a faint smile, we should place a bounty on Asna's core the second the boy steps into the eternal kingdom, the reward is a direct promotion to the upper celestial echelons. That's indeed much better. The first ruler approved, whether they brought us the core earlier or not, we will be losing nothing. 1608 5,000 years of slumber. A few moments later, the three celestial rulers had announced the bounty, an unprecedented decree that sent shockwaves through the territories of the unigens. At the heart of this tumult was the target of the bounty, Asna's core, now residing within Felix. In Apollo's territory, a magnificent city known as the Domain of Duality, the news of the bounty reached the god of light and darkness himself. This city was a marvel of divine architecture, split down the middle, one side bathed in blinding, eternal light, and the other shrouded in impenetrable darkness. The contrast was not just visual but symbolic, representing the balance between light and shadow, day and night. Apollo, seated in his grand palace that straddled the two realms, received the announcement with a raised eyebrow. His appearance was as striking as his domain, his hair shone like spun gold, and his eyes flickered with a light that seemed to capture the essence of the sun itself. He was draped in robes that shimmered with a radiant luminescence on one side, while the other melded into the shadows. As the proclamation echoed through his hall, a look of interest crossed his divine features. That boy has been the greatest source of entertainment besides the Unigen's celestial promotion event. I would have never thought he would be bringing it home. The prospect of capturing a SNES core was intriguing, but the involvement of Felix, a being who had endured and transformed so dramatically, piqued his curiosity even more. Should I join the bounty hunt? I am not too interested in becoming an upper celestial, but the hunt does sound fun. A thoughtful smile played on his lips as he considered the possibilities, the gears of strategy already turning in his mind. Meanwhile, in Hephaestus's territory, the reaction was starkly different. This realm was known as the Inferno Dominion, a vast expanse that resembled hell itself. Fire and magma flowed freely, creating rivers and lakes of liquid flame. The sky above was dominated by multiple suns, each casting an oppressive heat that kept the land in a perpetual state of smoldering fury. At the peak of the highest volcano sat Hephaestus's palace, a fortress carved from obsidian and magma, its walls glowing with the intense heat from within. The god of fire and forge, Hephaestus, stood at the heart of his domain. His eyes, usually a molten orange, now burned with a deep-seated anger as the announcement reached his ears. The pondered of Felix, and by extension, a SNES core, being the target of a bounty ignited a fierce rage within him. His reaction was understandable when considering that Felix was one of the main culprits in his promotion plan failure. If it wasn't for that meddling little sh*t, I would have already joined the upper celestial echelon and recovered my lost territories from that bastard Poseidon. He uttered with a bone-chilling tone. Felix had no idea how much resources Hephaestus had invested in his plan to open up the spirit realm to the eternal kingdom. Besides the divine armies and the divine equipment, he had invested an unholy amount of celestial energy to open up the portal, leading to the spirit realm. Even with Lord Hades injured, punished, and weakened, the celestial energy required to open up any gate or portal outside of the eternal kingdom was massive. Hephaestus had wasted millions of years to gather the necessary amount by either stealing it from his nemesis Poseidon's territories by conquering them or participating in events held by the three rulers themselves. The worst part, Poseidon had taken advantage of his absence and invaded his territories, conquering a significant portion before he returned. Territories within the Eternal Kingdom were everything since celestial energy was roaming freely across the entire realm, and the only way for Unigens to harvest it was through having a larger surface area than their peers. This created non-stop conflicts between Unigens and their neighboring territories. Poseidon and Hephaestus were always at each other's throats because of this. At this moment, Hephaestus understood that this was the perfect rebounds opportunity. He had both a chance for revenge and another chance to get promoted directly. With a snarl of fury, Hephaestus clenched his fist, the air around him shimmering with heat. He growled, his voice like the rumble of an earthquake, "Brat, your head will be mine." The rest of the Unigens might not share a direct relationship with Felix, but the bounty's reward was simply too enticing to give up on. Thus, across the entire Eternal Kingdom, the majority of the Unigens had their eyes affixed on Felix, awaiting the day of his ascension and joining the land of the gods. 5,000 years later in the elemental galaxy, Felix could be seen sleeping on a wooden bed above a cozy hatch nestled in the wilderness of the northern forest. The hatch was a sanctuary of warmth and tranquility, a stark contrast to the void's cold, endless expanse where he had last battled. Felix had genuinely slumbered for more than 5,000 years, even when his soul and body were at their peak forms. One could only wonder if he had slumbered all this time to avoid the consequences of his decision, or if his mental health was too damaged. Either way, his consciousness slowly seeped back into Felix's mind, and his eyes fluttered open, revealing a world blurred by time and disorientation. The room swam into focus gradually, the rustic wooden walls, the simple furnishings, and the warm light spilling from the hearth. Where am I? For a moment, Felix merely lay there, trying to piece together the fragmented memories of his last conscious moments. Suddenly, the battle with Nemo's alter ego played back in his mind like a vivid yet distant dream. He remembered the overwhelming onslaught, the transformation, the intervention of the paragon of sins, and the descent into the void. His body tensed as the memories flooded back, each one more intense and chaotic than the last. A sheen of cold sweat formed on his brow as he thought, was this all one nasty nightmare? But then, cutting through the silence of the hatch and the turmoil of his thoughts, a familiar voice greeted him. It was Lilith, the paragon of sins, her tone warm and filled with concern. "Little darling, awake at last? You sure had me worried for a second there. You slept for close to 5 millennia. No." At the sound of her voice, Felix's 7 hearts plummeted to the bottom of his stomach. The realization that it wasn't a nightmare, that everything he recollected had indeed happened, weighed heavily on him. But this time, he didn't give in to his emotions as his mind was stronger than ever. He closed his eyes once, and when he snapped them open, his expression was that of utter coldness. "Paragon, I believe you owe me an explanation." "So serious? How scary?" Lilith chuckled, "Join me in your consciousness space." As Felix entered his consciousness space, a place that once buzzed with the presence and energy of his tenants, a starkly different scene welcomed him. The vibrant town that had been the hub of activity and camaraderie was now deserted, a ghostly echo of its former self. "Where is everyone?" Felix's heart sank as he took in the desolation, the absence of his tenants leaving a palpable void in the space that had once been filled with their laughter, arguments, and support. As he wandered the empty streets, trying to make sense of the silence, his eyes were drawn to a tranquil area at the town's edge. There, a pool, clear and inviting, shimmered under the gentle light of the consciousness space, and by its edge sat the paragon of sins, Lilith. Lilith lounged gracefully, her posture relaxed yet inherently powerful. She wore a two-piece swimsuit that left little to the imagination, accentuating her voluptuous body and curves. The fabric hugged her form, a tantalizing display of her divine physique. Her presence was an arresting sight, a being of immense power and enigmatic allure at ease amid the deserted town. Standing next to her was Candace, dressed in a maid outfit. She held a tray with a couple of drinks, her posture attentive and her eyes watchful. Felix's arrival did not go unnoticed. Lilith's eyes, sharp and discerning, lifted to meet his. A slow, charming smile spread across her lips, and she gestured subtly, inviting him to join her. "Cutie, come sit with me, we have much to discuss." "Felix." Felix neglected her completely and stared at Candace, who seemed on the verge of breaking into tears. He could see from her expression that she wanted dearly to rush into him, but her feet refused to budge. "What did you do to her, and where is everyone?" he inquired with a bone-chilling tone. 1609. Unable to trust again. "They were being noisy, so I had to kick them out. As for her, I think she just misses you." Lilith responded casually while sipping wine from her glass. Black lines appeared on Felix's forehead instantly at her nonchalant attitude, but he refrained from behaving out or cursing her. The fact that she was able to kick his masters and tenants out implied that she had some control over his body. After all, having a wisp of consciousness was already enough to have any human dance at the palms of a primogenitor. But to have an actual soul of a unigen within you? That was an entirely different beast. At this moment, Felix wasn't a unigen yet or possessed a spiritual pressure compared to Lilith. So, he had to play it cool no matter how much she pissed him off. He accepted her invitation and sat next to her after giving Candace a short hug to calm her down. Then, he asked the $1 million question, "What's your end goal from all of this?" It's nothing too different than what your girl desires, freedom. Lilith sighed, unfortunately, you are the only one capable of helping me achieve my dream. Help? You still think I will help you with anything after what you did to me? Felix sneered. I know you are pissed off and feel betrayed, but everything I have done was for a purpose. Lilith mentioned, be honest, would Asna have agreed to allow me residency inside her core? The most private and sacred part of her entire being after telling you that I can turn you into a unigen. Forget Asna, would you have agreed to go for it without her consent if your options hadn't been limited to merely two? She added indifferently. Felix remained silent. He knew that she was right. If Lilith had approached him either when he was with Asna or after her abduction, none of them would have trusted her and accepted her condition. She was the paragon of sins, the embodiment of evil. Trusting her with anything was the dumbest move to make. Even when Felix was desperate to enter the Eternal Kingdom to save Asna, if she came clean and told him about Nemo's true identity, it would be enough to shatter any kind of goodwill from her. He would then totally drop any thought of becoming the new paragon of sins and seek other methods, even if it meant spending millions of years. He would not cave in and accept her deal. This implied that the only method for the paragon Lilith to enter Asna's core was by putting Felix in a situation where even his death wasn't the worst possible outcome. In his case, it was losing Asna's core to the paragon of sins. If it was simply his death, he knew that Asna's core would get taken by either his masters, Mother Siamese, or Lord Hades. But, when he realized that she was lying await, that option was shattered. Lilith would rather use this complex and roundabout strategy to ensure her entry to Asna's core than risk exposing her plans to Felix and getting rejected. If you reject me, you will always raise your guard against me, and this will kill any hope I have to achieve my goal. The paragon shrugged her shoulders, so, you can be mad about it, you can curse me for it, but I don't feel an ounce of guilt for screwing you over like this. Felix raised his head and looked into the sky in silence. Many thoughts swam in his mind, yet not a single one was related to whining about his situation. He understood that he simply got played, and the faster he accepted it, the easier it would be for him to move on. If he kept hanging on this matter, he would find out that there was no one to blame, literally. The Paragon of Sin's plan was a masterpiece, which caught even the three rulers off guard. How could Felix blame himself or anyone else? Even when he always knew that the Paragon of Sins wanted something from him, not in his wildest dreams would he have thought it would be residing in Asna's core. This is why I always liked you. The Paragon smiled charmingly. You might get emotional from time to time, but you are still rational at heart and understand that sometimes, you just lose. Felix didn't feel an ounce of joy from the compliment. Understanding his situation was one thing, but not being affected emotionally by it was another. Who could blame him? He considered Nemo as his son and there was nothing he wouldn't do for him. But now? It turned out to be the Paragon's Lilith's consciousness all along. How could he just accept this and move on? It was like a father having a son for the first time, and after caring and loving him for more than 20 years, the mother comes along and tells him that it was someone else's son. Whether the father could accept his situation or not didn't matter, that *T would shatter any man's heart to pieces. This was exactly how Felix felt at the moment. If you are hurt that your raccoon's love for you wasn't genuine, then you are mistaken. The Paragon Lilith lowered her glasses and said with a penetrative gaze, believe me or not, but the little retard wasn't part of my plan. What do you mean? Felix frowned. I have placed my wrathful personality fused with a part of my main soul inside my core. Then, I erased its memories, powers, and intelligence, turning the soul just like it belonged to a newborn baby. I knew that when it would awaken, you would be forced to seal it in the golden earrings. This was the original plan, but that little retard did this instead. The Paragon of Sins created a mirror, which showed the life of Nemo during the time of his awakening in the Elementals galaxy. While Felix was busy training his elemental manipulations and dealing with the conflicts in the planet Stravi, Nemo was alone in the Void Realm. Here, he has absorbed enough void energy to fulfill the price I have set for his memories, powers, and intelligence to be fully unlocked. The Paragon Lilith narrated with a clear tone of annoyance. He should have let the awakening occur as planned, but when memories started to slowly return and he realized his eventual destiny, he did this mid-awakening. By the binding power of the greed laws, Nimmo intoned, his voice resonating through the void, I wish for my soul to be split into halves. Let one half contain my memories, powers, and intelligence, while the other remains dormant. Nimmo, he spoke. Both Felix and Candace were left utterly stunned after hearing Nimmo's voice for the first time. It was unlike his alter ego, who always seemed mad and on the verge of a killing spree. As the words left his lips, a profound silence enveloped the cosmos. Then, the greed symbol responded to Nimmo's plea. A light, both terrifying and beautiful, enveloped him, its radiance piercing through the darkness of space. Arg! Nimmo felt a sensation like no other as the very fabric of his being began to divide. It was an excruciating process, his soul tearing apart to create two distinct entities. One half became a vessel for his memories, powers, and intelligence. A dormant repository sealed away from the universe, the other half remained, diminished but still potent, a shadow of his full potential. He did this, knowing full well that one half will always remain retarded and ignorant, behaving on pure emotion and instincts like an animal. The Paragon Lilith said with a displeased tone, I don't know why he did it. Was it to stay with you? Was it to protect you from me? Or something else? Whatever it is, it happened, and I refrained from acting up after realizing that you are still capable of sealing the other awakened half as planned. All in all, I have nothing to do with the other half even if it was part of my soul since his memories haven't fully been awakened. The Paragon Lilith said as she watched the light fade, exposing Nimmo, whose eyes turned half green and half red. The green half showed not an ounce of intelligence, representing Nimmo's usual happy-go-lucky attitude. While the red eye showed an unfiltered amount of rage and frustration. You bastard! How could you do this to the master? Give me back the control, or you will regret this. Are you listening to me? Unbothered by the curses thrown at him by his alter ego, Nimmo opened a void portal near Felix and jumped out of it, landing straight on the back of his head. Eee! Eee! You little, how many times did I tell you not to scare me like this? Felix chuckled as he lifted Nimmo and gave him one of his special belly rub attacks, leaving Nimmo squealing in enjoyment. In that fine moment, Felix had no clue that Nimmo had marked himself as a being who was willing to endure unimaginable pain and loss to protect him, his father. While Candace was watching this scene with tears already flooding down her cheek, Felix's eyes seemed still a bit dead. I figured as much, after what I did to you, there is no way you will believe anything I show you. Paragon Lilith shrugged carelessly, as I said, believe it or not, I don't really care. That little retard is gone either way. 1610 Seeking clarifications. He is gone. In the quiet aftermath of the revelation, Felix found himself unable to show a proper reaction. His heart, which should have been filled with grief and anger, was as silent as a deserted graveyard. As he grappled with this new reality, memories of Nimmo began to surface, each one a poignant reminder of the bond they had shared. Yet, his heart remained unmoving. You ruined me. He murmured with a lost look as he stared into the sky, feeling like his heart had finally shattered after all the beatdowns he went through. Now, no matter how much Lilith promised him that she had nothing to do with Nimmo's cute version, Felix was simply incapable of trusting her. All of his memories with Nimmo, whether good or bad, were overshadowed by her presence, making him feel like this was nothing more than another attempt to manipulate him. As they say, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. You have my powers now. Use greed laws to wish for the truth. If you aren't interested in it, then don't bother me with this subject again, and let's move on to the serious stuff. Lilith yawned lazily, unbothered by Felix's inner conflict. When Felix heard the first sentence, he raised his eyebrows in surprise. He knew that he would be able to use the powers of the seven sins after the cores were merged, but he was still a bit taken aback that he could actually use them. It was a surreal feeling after watching the Paragon Lilith and Nemo's alter ego use those busted laws to mop the floor with him. Still, he tightened his fists and put those thoughts at the back of his mind for now. There would be time to discover his laws and the real truth about Nemo. In his eyes, if Lilith was telling the truth, then, he wouldn't hesitate to revive Nemo using a part of his soul to avoid her manipulation through him. If not, it was a lesson well learned. How surprising, you managed to swallow the excitement of using the sin's laws. Lilith praised. Stop trying to butter me up and tell me how you managed to prepare this far ahead. Did you create the void race to help you with this? How did you know I would be able to obtain Nemo's egg and even the sealing hall to contain him? How did you survive the effects of the sealing hall? Most importantly, how did you pull all of this under the eyes of the three rulers? I am not too knowledgeable, but I am certain you being in a SNES core isn't a favorable outcome for them. Felix fired a series of questions with a cold tone. Interesting chain of questions. Lilith chuckled as she took a sip from her wine glass. Felix remained silent, knowing that he had no leverage to make her answer his questions. So, he was depending on her mood and obvious attempts to make friends with him. Fortunately for him, Lilith wasn't too interested in keeping the truth to herself. First of all, I created the void race as a decoy for my severe punishment after I separated my core and placed a new soul in it with all sorts of mechanisms that would imitate a perfect Unigen awakening. Lilith shared akin to a bedtime storyteller. Thankfully, I have received help from cows to make them, which reduced the punishment of creating them. Lord Cows has assisted you. Candace's eyes widened a little bit in shock. She always knew that Lord Cows shared some sort of a relationship with Lilith, but he was always uptight about it. Darling, please refrain from shouting in my ear, Lilith said with a polite charming smile, but Candace instantly lowered her head while shivering in her place. Can you not bully her? Felix narrowed his eyes in displeasure. I asked her politely, though. Lilith sighed, there is no winning with you. Candace, stand behind me, Felix said while staring at Lilith. I. Candace was left frozen in her place, wanting badly to hide behind Felix, but her feet refused to move. Lilith was her creator and goddess, her orders and wishes were absolute. You may go, darling. Lilith smiled faintly. Candace immediately stood behind Felix while holding onto his shirt, refusing to let go like she had finally found a life jacket after drowning for 5,000 years. I believe the creation of Void Race happened billion years ago, during the Primogenitors era. Are you informing me that's when you started preparing for that significant day? Felix continued on the subject like nothing happened. Have you seen through the future? Why have you started so early? He asked with a solemn tone. 1 billion years? Asna wasn't even born yet to know that her core would be the key to her freedom. 1 billion years? He couldn't even think that far back, as it was an unfathomable period. Yet, he was being told that Lilith was preparing for him all that time. It was hard for him to picture it. 1 billion years might seem like a lot for you, but soon enough, you will understand how far the rabbit hole goes. Lilith smiled before answering only the third question. I had to start early since I knew the punishment of both wishes combined resulted in me slumbering for eons. It would be ironic if I slept through the significant day. Also, I needed some time to create Lucifer, the personification of evil, to help you obtain the very first foundation to become me. Felix was more curious about how she was able to see that far ahead. In his eyes, if it was wish-related, she wouldn't have hidden it from him. This made him assume that maybe, just maybe, someone was telling her what to do. His first guess was the Unigen of space/time, as he was the only one with the capacity to see that far ahead and not be affected by sharing it with others, unlike Lord Zervan. Don't waste your breath on this. Lilith smiled with a tint of sympathy in her eyes. The reality will find you soon enough. I just desire you would be powerful enough to handle it. What do you? Do you have any more questions? Understanding that it was his cue to drop the subject, Felix could only move on with his Q&A, not wanting to waste this opportunity. What happened between you and Lord Cows? It was clear that he desired some sort of payback. Have you used him and threw him away? Felix narrowed his eyes. Now when he thought about it more carefully, he noticed that Lilith didn't have a third eye on her forehead while all the void creatures possessed them like Lord Koa's. In other words, the void race used void powers from Lord Cows, but sin powers from Lilith, which explained why she was happy with the outcome as it would reduce her punishment duration immensely. Ask him, don't bother me with this. Lilith waved her hand carelessly. Felix glanced at Candace and both of them reached the same conclusion that Lord Cows must have been manipulated by her. Felix couldn't picture what would happen to Lord Cows if Lilith used her lust sins on him when he had no immunity. Even an elemental lord would be played like a fiddle by her. No wonder he desperately wanted Nimmo to replace her and avenge him, knowing that it was beyond his abilities. Alas, Lilith was simply too devious, even Nimmo proved to be her in disguise, ruining his only chance of revenge. As another victim of her manipulation, Felix understood that the sensation was beyond humiliating. 1611 Seeking clarifications. 2. What about the three rulers? How can they get fooled by you? Aren't their eyes everywhere? Aren't they the most knowledgeable beings in the universe? Felix frowned. I can't imagine you or anyone capable of pulling a fast one on them. Indeed, they are the most intelligent and knowledgeable beings in our universe. But, I am the most cunning. Lilith smirked faintly. That's not an answer. Felix's eyelids twitched. It is if you stopped thinking of them as untouchable gods. Lilith advised with a knowing tone, you are about to become a Unigen, the closest being to them in terms of powers and intelligence. The faster you accept this fact, the easier it will be for you to take them on. Otherwise, no matter how powerful you get, it wouldn't matter. Felix remained silent. He would be lying if he said that the three rulers didn't scare the sh*t out of him. Ever since his rebirth, he was hearing about them being the most fearsome beings in the universe with the capability to handle anyone or anything, even Unigens. The fact that he got killed by a single smite of them and watched his beloved get abducted right before his eyes without the capability to even lift his head, didn't make his dread any better. He believed them to be the final bosses in his journey and it didn't sit right in his mind to have them played by Lilith. But, after hearing Lilith's speech, it started to come to him that he was a mere step away from their realm, and if he still considered them untouchable, he would be losing the battle before it started. When I was young I considered primogenitors as gods, and now that I have surpassed them in strength, I see them no different than the rest of races. Felix thought to himself as narrowed his eyes at his palms, they still surpass me in wisdom and maturity, but with my strength above them, none of that matters anymore. I don't know how Lilith managed to pull a fast one on them, but since she succeeded, it means that they are limited just like any other being. Felix frowned. Gods aren't supposed to be limited. Does that mean there is still a true God out there even above them? A true untouchable being? Your thought process somehow makes me feel insulted. Lilith pouted in dissatisfaction. Just because I did it, doesn't mean an idiot like you can do it too. Don't get too cocky. We are not the same. Felix's eyelids twitched, but he had no retort. He hated to admit it, but Lilith was indeed on a different level of cunningness and intelligence. Just because she was able to make the three rulers have some hard time, it didn't mean that all Unigens were able to do the same. Still, I will admit that I have gotten a bit lucky. No, we have gotten lucky. Lilith suddenly switched her tone to a serious one. What do you mean? At the moment, the celestial energy within the Eternal Kingdom is at an all-time low after those morons attempted to forcefully break past the universe's heart and reach the other side. Their attempt didn't just fail, it also caused a disturbance in the universe's heart, making it spew less celestial energy than the norm. Now, they are considering giving it another chance and require an insane amount of celestial energy to pull it off, which made them act stringy in their actions. Is that why everyone in the Eternal Kingdom is at war with each other? Felix raised an eyebrow in surprise. Felix was quite knowledgeable about the Eternal Kingdom, including the universe's heart, the other side, territorial conflicts between unigens, upper celestial ranks, etc. After all, he had Duke Humphrey all to himself, and when he failed to explain something to him, he asked Lord Hades for clarifications. By the time he left the heavenly plane, he was more familiar with the Eternal Kingdom than the universe. Still, he had no clue that the three rulers were the ones putting the Eternal Kingdom in a permanent warmonger era due to the absence of celestial energy. He realized just how important and dear celestial energy was to unigens. Yes. Why haven't unigens done anything to them? Can't they take them down if they combined their forces? Who told you the unigens don't know about their plans? Lilith shook her head. How do you think the three rulers bought most of the unigens to their side? It was through the promise of reaching the other side and breaking free from their universal shackles. Is that so? Felix wouldn't say he was surprised, as he had always assumed that the unigens wouldn't accept being in a hierarchy system unless there was a strong motive behind it. If you seek freedom just like them, why are you down here instead of helping them? Why have you chosen me to help you out? In fact, why aren't you taking control over my body? I believe it shouldn't be hard now that both your soul and core are within me. Felix frowned. Felix genuinely thought that Lilith was bullshitting him before to gain his approval, and when she resided in Asna's core, she would get rid of him or something. So, when he woke up and found out nothing negative happened to him, he was a bit taken aback. Because their method would never succeed. As for why I am betting on you instead of taking control over your body, Lilith smiled with a knowing, beautiful smile. You will come to understand in the future. Aren't you worried that I will kill you when I get stronger than you? Aren't you worried about losing your powers after I become the new paragon? There were so many ifs and holes in Lilith's plan of letting him take the lead when she had the ability to get rid of him right now and here. Felix was incapable of trusting her motives, no matter how cooperative she seemed. He might not show it, but he had no intentions in the slightest of forgiving her, even if she helped him out from now on without betraying him. He understood that Lilith could feel the suppressed hatred and rage he was storing for her. Whether you believe me or not, I have no interest in leading your upcoming journey. It has to be you, and when the time comes, you will see why. Lilith lowered her sunglasses and took a small sip from her glass. Then, she smiled, as for killing me later on? All I can do is wish you good luck. Felix remained silent, staying deep in his thoughts. Lilith seemed a bit too confident in her ability to survive his revenge later on after giving him the freedom to operate as normal. This disturbed him a bit. Does she think I will show her mercy if she helped me reach the top and save Asna? He narrowed his eyes coldly. I understand you can hear me, so listen very well. At the first opportunity, I pledge you, I am going to make you regret the day you have chosen to f*ck with me. I hope you can be rough. Lilith licked her lips seductively. I love it rough. B*tch. Felix gave her a revolting look. Lilith merely giggled in amusement at his curse, while Candace sensed her heart sink to the bottom in fear. Her beauty and sexiness might be compared to Asna, but Felix didn't feel an ounce of affection or lust when handling her, only disgust and hatred. He wasn't afraid to show it in the open now that he understood his fate was interlocked with her and she could not achieve her goal without him. While it seemed dumb to give Felix this kind of freedom and leverage over her, Felix realized that Lilith would never do this without a reason. It was second nature for her to be manipulative, and he perceived every word and every action she made with that goal as her target. Lilith gave no head to his thoughts and asked, "Do you have any more questions?" "You never told me how did the ceiling hall not affect you," Felix mentioned. "It did weaken me, but nothing as serious as what happened to your cute raccoon, since our powers aren't on the same level." Lilith answered. "Expected as much." Felix nodded after getting a confirmation. Nemo had separated his soul into two, while his entire soul in the first place wasn't complete since it was part of Lilith. So, the level of damage done to him couldn't be compared to Lilith when using their laws. Have you satisfied your curiosity? Can we talk business now? Lilith said. Lilith had indeed answered most of Felix's questions about the situation and motives. Whether she was telling the truth or not, his truth eyes hadn't found an ounce of deceit in her tone. Still, Felix wasn't planning to trust his eyes blindly, having a strong feeling that if Lilith wanted to lie, even the truth vision wouldn't capture it. Before we do that, I want my masters and tenants to return. Felix said with a cold tone, this isn't negotiable. Felix had no interest in carrying on their conversation without his masters and tenants being around. I don't mind, but I see no point in having them around you anymore. Lilith shared with a casual tone, you are going to lose all of your elemental manipulations and their abilities after you become the paragon of sins. I guess it's inevitable. Felix smiled wryly. What do you think? Lilith rolled her eyes at him. 1612 forced to start fresh. Felix wasn't really surprised to hear that he would be forced to drop all of his elemental manipulations after the ascension. By now, even if no one had confirmed it to him, he was able to reason about the origin of the three rulers and their relation to the three celestial languages. If you dared to step into the eternal kingdom without getting rid of those ugly tattoos, you will be controlled akin to a doll by the three rulers. Lilith mentioned calmly, the only reason none of them have tried to control you is because Asna's core can absorb the bits of celestial energy released at you from the eternal kingdom. That's also why they didn't bother to smite you again. But, it's a different story if you stepped into their home ground. Damn, that's unfortunate. Felix sighed while rubbing his eyelids. What are you on about? Candace asked with a soft tone, having no idea what they were talking about. The universe is made out of 5 pillars, 3 celestial languages, the laws, and elements. Elements can awaken their consciousness and become elementals. I believe the same had occurred with the laws and the 3 celestial languages. In other words, the 3 rulers are the consciousness of the 3 celestial languages. Felix shared with a solemn tone. Ever since Felix heard that elements could awaken their consciousness, he always had the theory that maybe Unigens were nothing but the consciousness of laws awakening. If he took it even further, then the 3 rulers should be the souls of the 3 celestial languages. The fact that 3 of the highest-ranked divinities were created by them and shared similar names to the 3 celestial languages made him believe his theory even more. The only reason he wasn't 100% convinced yet was due to some holes. Candace spotted them immediately. How can Unigens be laws gaining consciousness? That doesn't make sense when considering that some Unigens have control over multiple laws. She tilted her head in confusion. You're right. Felix glanced at Lilith, seemingly passing the question to her. He was somewhat certain about the 3 rulers' origin, but his Unigens theory was a bit shaky because of that. If he considered Asna as a celestial like the 3 rulers and not a normal Unigen, then, she might have some special condition for her birth. But, other Unigens' origin didn't make the most sense either. For example, Lilith was the Unigen of 7 sins and void laws. Cronus controlled space and time. Lord Hades guarded over spirits and souls, which weren't the same thing either. So, how could they be the consciousness of laws? Don't look at me. Lilith chuckled, it's not fun if you were given all the answers, is it now? Felix's eyelids twitched at her childish behavior, but, he knew that it was impossible to extract information from her unless she wanted to share it. So, he dropped this matter and returned to his original theory. Can you at least confirm if the 3 rulers are the consciousness of the 3 celestial languages? All I can say is that they rule over the 3 celestial languages. Whether they are the consciousness of them or not, that's for you to figure out. Lilith replied with a half-assed answer again. As you can see, it will be near impossible for me to utilize my elemental manipulations in the Eternal Kingdom since their source in the first place was the 3 rulers. Felix sighed in disappointment, they have helped me reach this far, but if I dared to keep the inscriptions on me, I would be an open target to them. The worst part? Felix knew that he would be losing his elemental immunites, and bloodline abilities, such as void domain, illusion domain, etc. After all, their origin was from primogenitors' bloodlines, and the origin of primogenitors' powers were the three rulers, their creators. Just like vampires, heavenly turtles, shadowborns, and other races were born with limited elemental manipulation, which was inherited from their ancestors. Even though they had no visible perfect inscriptions on their bodies, Lady Sphinx had found out that at the depth of their DNA, the Universal Codex was written. In the case of elves and dwarves, they had the runic and divine codex also written in their DNA. They were born with it straight from the universe instead of inheriting it from Lady Yggdrasil or Cyclope. In conclusion, Felix could not possess an ounce of relation to the three rulers, and the only method to achieve this was by completely wiping out all of his abilities as well. It was the same as beginning with a fresh character. That's unfortunate. Candace smiled bitterly. You have worked hard to obtain them and master their abilities. All of that effort would go to waste now. It is what it is. Felix had long since accepted this fact and was prepared mentally for it. The only saving grace from this was the fact he would be in control of seven sins, void law, and evil energy. Seven sins' powers were too varied and powerful to cover all of the bases. Wait, is it possible to wish for elemental manipulations without the three rulers' constraints? Candace wondered, or at least immunities. I don't know, we will have to test it out later. Felix was 99% convinced that it would fail in both scenarios since elemental immunites were also related to the three celestial languages. Unless, he wished for immunites related to Unigens, but he didn't know if they would be delivered or not since he understood that wishes related to Unigens weren't approved by the universe often. If it was easy to wish for permanent powers from Unigens, then Lilith would have ruled the Eternal Kingdom a long while ago. Greed laws were busted, but the universe had its limitations imputed to keep the balance. Before Felix could test any of his new powers or move on with his discussion with Lilith, he wanted to reach out to Lady Sphinx, understanding that she should have gathered everyone in her consciousness space again. However, since he was in the elemental galaxy, he had no connection to the UVR, even his wisps outside were wiped out. It was normal considering his soul was on the verge of collapse. Lilith left him be, having no interest in convincing him anymore to drop them. The first thing Felix did was place a wisp in his consciousness space to keep Candace's company against Lilith's bullying, then, he switched to his main consciousness and stepped outside of the cozy hatch. Felix. Immediately after, Foremother Siamese's voice resounded in Felix's mind. It's me. Felix replied. He understood that Foremother Siamese didn't reach out to him after waking up, because she had no clue if it was him or Lilith. He didn't know how he made it back to the elemental galaxy, but it was clear that Lilith had dropped him off with her Nemo's form and Foremother Siamese could only allow it. It was better to keep a close eye on him in her territory. Whoosh! With a faint breeze, Foremother Siamese manifested in front of Felix from the grass, dirt, and leaves near his hatch. How did it go? Sphinx has told me about what happened in the void. She inquired with a solemn tone. Is she in the galaxy? Felix raised an eyebrow in surprise. She is in the 4. Before she could complete her sentence, Lady Sphinx appeared in front of Felix from the grain of sand on the ground. Just as Felix opened his mouth after seeing her face, Lady Sphinx embraced him tightly. Master! Felix wasn't able to speak anything besides calling her name after sensing her hands clutching tightly into his clothes. It was unusual for Lady Sphinx to be emotionally distressed, so this spoke volumes of how difficult the situation was for her too. Felix had no idea that Lady Sphinx had been keeping a watch on him for the past 5,000 years, not knowing if he would be the one waking up or Lilith. All she could do was watch from a distance and wish for the best, knowing that it wasn't in her power to change the outcome anymore. Whoosh whoosh! Suddenly, 2 gravitational gates opened up near Felix and Lady Sphinx. Wendigo and Saurus jumped out of them and landed on the ground in a kneeling position. We welcome back, the Master. They uttered simultaneously with their heads lowered. 1613 A new way to recover elemental manipulations? Felix ignored them and continued his embrace for a moment until Lady Sphinx let go of him. I am glad that you are fine, she said with a warm smile as she held his cheeks together like a mother. Felix enjoyed her touch as he could feel her sincere care coursing through him. Lady Sphinx might always seem rational, calculative, and distant, but when it came to Felix, she never shied from showing her genuine emotions. Did she do anything to you? Lady Sphinx suddenly switched to a cold expression. No. Felix shook his head. We just talked. I will share the details with you and the others. Speaking of them, are they with you? We are here. Did that *tch make your life difficult? Thor responded with a stern tone. Do excuse us for not being of any assistance. Elder Kraken sighed. She kicked us off the moment she gained control. How strange, that manipulative vixen would never go this far and simply let you be. Lord Koaz intoned emotionlessly, but it had a tint of loathing buried in it. The rest of the tenants each gave out their statements about the situation and the majority seemed concerned. Let's talk inside. Instead of answering them, Felix reached out with his hand to Lady Sphinx, inviting them back into his consciousness space. Lady Sphinx didn't hesitate to kick them off her mind. After they entered his consciousness space, Felix glanced at the kneeling Darkins and uttered, You haven't tried to escape? How uncharacteristic of you! We wouldn't have dared. Wendigo and Saurus replied. Sure, sure. Felix snickered. He knew that if he had genuinely died or Lilith took complete control over him, they wouldn't hesitate to ditch him. Evil energy made them loyal, but it didn't mean that they loved it. Still, he also allowed them back into his consciousness space. Can I? Mother Siamese requested. Of course. Felix permitted her attendance with open arms. While Nemo's alter ego battle didn't end as he had anticipated, he was more than grateful for her assistance. She had given it her all and he appreciated it. As everyone gathered, a silent consensus was achieved after they spotted Lilith sitting by the pool without a care in the world. All of their expressions went for the worst, like they had seen their worst enemy. My little servants, you came back to take care of me again? I knew you would miss me. Lilith chuckled. What are you on about? Felix frowned after noticing his master's and the tenants' expressions getting uglier. When no one appeared to answer him, Felix glared at Wendigo and he immediately shared with him a memory package of what happened during his slumber. In less than a second of viewing the package, Felix's rage increased tenfold until his eyes turned crimson red and reflected the symbol of a dragon. You really have no bottom line, he uttered with a bone-chilling tone while staring daggers at Lilith. His reaction was within reason as the memory package showed him a film of humiliation and its protagonists were the tenants. With her overbearing spiritual pressure and control over his body, Lilith made it impossible for anyone to leave his consciousness space and bossed them around for centuries. He observed as his masters were turned into servants against their will, listening to her orders and whims forcefully. Only when she was bored with playing with them and they commenced to irritate her with their noise did she kick them out and leave Candace behind. Bottom line? Did I do anything wrong? Lilith acted confused. I am a Unigen and they are clowns born to entertain us. Isn't my treatment the correct dynamic between us? Her acid-laced words were like poisonous knives stabbing all the primogenitors straight in their souls. But none of them were able to retort against her. After all, their purpose was indeed as described, clowns, born for entertainment purposes. Big words from someone enslaved by the universe. Felix responded coldly, you can't even use your powers without getting punished, like a child being spanked for misbehaving. True. Lilith chuckled, seemingly unaffected by his words. You will soon join the party and understand how it feels. Felix remained silent, knowing that any insults directed at her would reflect on him later on. Don't fall to her level, she has already shown us how childish she can be for the sake of her amusement. Lady Sphinx came forward. You are right. Felix couldn't agree more. While Lilith was extremely shrewd and intelligent, her childish and playful personality was too irritating to deal with. It was best not to engage with her in such subjects as she could never lose. Let's sit down. I have much to share. Felix and the tenants proceeded to the central table in the town, leaving Lilith alone near the pool. She also didn't bother to join them. She lifted her sunglasses and continued her relaxation with a wide smile. Meanwhile, Felix had spent the next half an hour informing everyone about what he had discussed with Lilith. After he was done, he received mixed reactions. The fact she wants to remain hands out in your future journey is great and all, but I have a feeling that even after you become the new paragon of sins, she can still turn on you in the future. Ramongandra uttered with a solemn tone, there is no way she will give you this much control without having a guarantee. Everyone nodded in agreement, even Felix considered the same. For now, we don't know what she has planned on the low and we can only move with the stream, Thor added. Knowing that speculations wouldn't help them with anything at the moment, they could only close this subject. On the other hand, it's regrettable that you will be losing your manipulations and abilities. Elder Kraken shook his head in disappointment. All of them assumed that it was bound to happen, but still, after receiving confirmation, it didn't feel good in the slightest, especially for Thor and Ramongandra who had spent the most time in training Felix's elemental manipulations. It had to be done, but not all hope is lost. Lady Sphinx narrowed her eyes in the direction of Lilith. The fact that Asna's core can devour another Unigen's core and obtain his powers means that there is a chance you can do the same with other Unigens. Everyone felt their hearts skip a beat at her bold statement, absorbing the powers of other Unigens. If this was possible, Felix could recover a much more powerful version of his previous elements. For example, instead of the water element, he could absorb Poseidon's core and obtain control over the laws of water, ice, and fog. He could even ignore his lost elements and go for other Unigens like Apollo and Hephaestus. This sounds a bit insane, but I can see it working out. Felix knitted his eyebrows thoughtfully. Just as Felix planned on seeking Lord Hades' help in confirming the theory, a spiritual mirror manifested before everyone. After a few ripples, Lord Hades' expressionless face was displayed on it. The timing was perfect, which meant he was already watching everything since Felix had opened his eyes. So, without bothering to greet anyone, he got straight to business. Asna's core is considered to be one of the most powerful cores in the universe, rivaling that of the three rulers before awakening. He confirmed with a monotonous voice, in other words, there is no Unigen's core capable of resisting its devouring capabilities. Felix and the tenant's eyes glimmered in delight at the sound of that. However, before any of them could react, Lord Hades added, however, whether Felix will be able to enjoy their powers post-ascension is unknown. 1614 Testing the equal trade symbol. Is it because I will be a Unigen? Felix frowned. Lord Hades nodded. Felix understood that Unigens were extremely powerful, but that power came with many limitations. The universal punishment was just one aspect of them. The true limitation was the fact it was near impossible for Unigens to utilize any other powers outside of their laws, especially, if the powers were laws-based. It was like all Unigens were in a stadium race and each Unigen had their line. The universe made it impossible for them to tread on their peers' lines at all times. But, this isn't made in stone yet. Lady Sphinx remarked, Felix won't be like any ordinary Unigen. His origin is a human form and we already know that humans are the only species with the potential to utilize all elements. This might translate to laws. Indeed, Felix was never a natural-born Unigen and some of the universal laws might not apply to him. Thor added, who knows? He might not even experience the universal chains after his ascension. Ha 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 ha. Before anyone could respond, a mocking and irritating giggle resounded from a distance. Thor's lips twitched in annoyance. When he opened his mouth, wanting to retort against her, his brother Jurmai held him back with a shake of a head. It's not worth it. You're right. Thor exhaled and ignored that witch. There is no escaping from chains after the ascension. A Unigen without anything to hold him back is no different than a free-spirited deity. The universe will never allow such a foolery. Lord Hades addressed calmly. Primogenitors weren't chained because their influence was extremely small. Now, imagine Cronus, the guardian of time/space, without those chains. He could literally reset the universe back to its original state if he desired. Such powers were too overwhelming to not be policed. As much as Felix hated, no detested from the bottom of his soul, the thought of being chained and having his actions limited, he had to accept it for the sake of his beloved. There weren't many chances to climb that insurmountable wall between a mortal and a Unigen besides turning into one. Fortunately, the universe is somewhat just in its treatment, Felix remarked. Unigens weren't punished for using their powers, but for abusing them, and there was a big difference. For example, Lilith was punished only when she used her powers to separate her soul or when she created a new unnatural race with some of her abilities. The universe wouldn't punish her if she used her powers within a limit. You may not know this, but most of the universal punishments are related to lesser beings or the balance of the universe. Lord Hades shared, if your powers didn't affect those two aspects, it's rare for the universe to intervene. Also, it's very hard for the universe to make a judgment if the situation is too complicated. I have noticed this too. Felix nodded. What occurred in the Heavenly Plains War was the perfect example of this. Godfather Hephaestus had actively attacked Lord Hades, yet Lord Hades was the only one punished for all the spirits, which were erased from the universe. If the universe had a reasonable consciousness, it would notice that Godfather Hephaestus was the culprit and the one deserving to be punished. Instead, Lord Hades got shafted for failing his duties and Godfather Hephaestus walked freely. In other words, you have to understand the loopholes, the dos and don'ts, so you won't have the universe punish you for something not started by you, Thor mentioned with a serious tone. Felix acknowledged in agreement. For now, how about you test out your laws with something simple? Lady Sphinx suggested, try asking if you can use the powers of other Unigens after devouring their cores post-ascension. Felix decided to go for it. Without delay, he switched his focus to his main consciousness and exited the hatch. Do I just will it? Like using bloodline abilities? Felix asked. Yes. Lord Hades answered. Felix closed his eyes and began to summon the greed laws, equal trade symbol. The air around him thickened, and a profound silence enveloped the space. Then, above Felix, a symbol began to manifest. It started as a mere wisp, a curl of green mist, but it quickly took form and solidified into the shape of a fox. The fox symbol, glowing a bright, ethereal green, was elegant yet complex, its many lines and swirls speaking of ancient contracts and cosmic balance. Felix had seen this symbol so many times, but this was the very first time he was the one summoning it, which made him feel different inside. Now, state your wish and choose the payment. Lord Hades said. I will choose void energy. Felix extended his hand forward and imagined a small void rift opening up in front of him. Almost instantly, a black crack in space manifested and widened until it was big enough for one hand. Laws are really on a different level of simplicity. Felix commented with a pleased look. He understood that if it was void elemental manipulation, it wouldn't have been this easy. He would have needed to do some mind and elemental gymnastics before the same rift could open up. Just like someone using concept destruction ability in a law-based version of the same ability. Felix had to study and understand the properties of the desired concept he wanted to eliminate. But, if he had destruction laws? All he needed was a look and the concept would be gone. It makes sense. Lady Sphinx clarified, just like bloodlines are considered borrowed powers, the primogenitors are using borrowed abilities from the three rulers. The only difference is that we had to learn and master everything related to our elements while bloodline users receive already mastered abilities. Felix and the others nodded in agreement. In their eyes, the three rulers had given them a safe with millions of locks and made them search for the keys required to open every part of it. Meanwhile, the Unigens possessed some of the keys from birth and the rest after awakening. All in all, no effort was required and Felix was more than pleased with this. Soon, he placed his hand inside the void rift and drew forth an immense reservoir of void energy. As the void energy coalesced around him, forming a vortex of dark, pulsating power, Felix spoke his wish inwardly, I seek the truth. Reveal to me whether it's possible to benefit from the Unigens' abilities if a SNES core devours their cores. I offer this void energy as my payment. Whoosh! Whoosh! The universe seemed to not care about the spoken language as the greed laws responded to his call by absorbing an uncanny amount of void energy through the symbol, resembling an infinite black hole. To everyone's surprise, the symbol kept on absorbing non-stop for a minute, 5 minutes, and then an hour. Isn't taking a bit too long? Four Mother Siamese murmured. It's normal, elemental energy is considered the cheapest currency used in those trades. Sometimes, the symbol may absorb it for more than a day and eventually cancel the trade. Candace answered her, Jinns avoid using it because of this. Equal trade symbol worked based on value, elemental energy and neutral energy were everywhere, which made their values at the bottom of the barrel. The rarer and greater the payment, the better. If Felix possessed some celestial energy in his tank, the trade would have been concluded in a few seconds at best due to its immense value. Even though Felix knew this, he used void energy to also assay out the bottom line of the universe. Unfortunately, he was left waiting patiently for more than 12 hours and when the trade was concluded and the response came to him, he was left speechless. The universe didn't speak to him in words but implanted the response in his mind like he always knew it. Unknown? After painstakingly waiting for half a day, all I get is unknown. You kidding me? Felix gazed at the sky with a wronged look like had just gotten scammed. 1615. Let's pump those numbers. The universe doesn't answer questions or problems that have never been tested before. Lilith suddenly appeared next to the central table and answered Felix while eating a red apple. She was still in her swimsuit but had a transparent robe over her. Everyone went silent and gave her a deathly unwelcoming glare, but she didn't seem bothered by them. She pulled a chair and sat with them with a bored look. Without anyone asking her, she started sharing the limitations of the equal trade symbol. If it's a one-on-one wish in the universe, it can't be cancelled until the price is paid. Even if the price is paid, it doesn't mean that the universe will deliver satisfactory results. You aren't paying to fulfill the wish, you are paying to see if the wish is even possible or not. So, whether it fails or it succeeds, you should always know that your payment isn't refundable. Felix waited until she finished and then uttered coldly, who asked? Just because she was teaching him about her laws, it didn't mean that he was willing to accept them with open arms. He wasn't that cheap after literally just witnessing his masters getting humiliated by her. Plus, if she really cared, she could have come forward before taking the test, instead of letting them rot for 12 hours. I don't care about your touchy feelings. Lilith yawned lazily. You are going to listen as I have no patience to watch you test every single law and its limitations. For someone with patience to wait 1 billion years for my birth, you sure are full of crap. Felix sneered. Seeing that he wasn't planning to lend her an ear, Lilith merely snapped her fingers, and Felix's pupils widened after a memory package was forcefully shoved in his mind. In less than a split second, he read and analyzed the package, making him more informed about all of the available symbols to him. You're welcome. Lilith said as she bit a huge chunk from her apple, uncaring about the juices flowing down her cleavage in front of everyone. After a couple more quick bites, she finished the apple and flicked it to the middle of the table. Then, she walked back to the pool, making a clucking noise with her sandals. What a freaky creature! Thor commented, having a weird feeling that her personality was a mix of multiple characters. The others had the same feeling too. I guess we can skip straight to the real deal now, Felix uttered reluctantly after the joy of testing his new laws was stolen from him. What are you planning to do? Thor asked. Since I can use the laws now without the universe's judgment sword over my head, I am thinking of using some wishes for my friends, my race, answer some questions, and enhance my strength a bit before the ascension, Felix replied. Felix knew that the moment he entered the Eternal Kingdom, he might never leave it. Since he couldn't take his friends with him or protect his race, he wanted to do one last thing for them before taking off. He wasn't doing it out of the goodness of his heart as that was long since erased, he simply had nothing to lose and he was a man of his word. He always wanted to help his race get stronger to fend for themselves and the opportunity finally presented itself. After Felix spent a couple of hours messing with his sin symbols, he left the elemental galaxy and headed to the Void Nation's dimensional pocket. He achieved it with a single thought, creating a void portal that connected the dimensional pocket to his location. It was the same as Lord Koa's advanced portal ability and he was able to utilize it with a mere thought while Lord Kaos had spent God knows how many eons to master it. The moment Felix emerged from the portal, a ripple of awareness spread through the Void Nation like a shockwave. Every creature, from the smallest voidling to the councilman, felt an overwhelming presence wash over them. What's that? Why does it feel like little God's aura? It was more than just the return of their leader, it was the advent of something divine that resonated deep within their very essence. Instinctively, everyone dropped whatever they were doing and rushed to the portal's area. When the crowd arrived and noticed Felix floating with an indifferent expression and a pure sinister aura revolving around him, everyone began to kneel as if compelled by a force greater than themselves. It started with those nearest to Felix, their bodies bending in involuntary reverence, and spread outwards in a wave of submission and awe. Each one felt an undeniable urge to show their respect, a deep sense of worship that was both bewildering and absolute. Felix, standing amidst the sea of kneeling beings, took in the scene with a mixture of surprise and understanding. I can feel a deep sense of connection with everyone like I can erase their existence with a mere thought. He realized that the changes within him, the transformation and the power he had gained, emanated an aura of authority and divinity that the Void Nation was innately sensitive to. As he walked through the ranks of his followers, a silent procession of kneeling figures on either side, Felix felt the weight of their reverence. "My lord, welcome back," Arthur greeted with his head lowered. "Congratulations on the ascension. I always believed you would achieve it," Mammon uttered respectfully. "Haha. I can't believe this, my king has turned into my god." The ruiner laughed boastingly as always, it couldn't get any better. "The tattoos befit you," Miriam said with a tint of seduction in her voice. "You haven't told them about what happened?" Felix asked Candace telepathically. "It was for the best." Candace nodded. Felix agreed as there was no need to let his subordinates know that he had lost the battle and their real goddess was hitchhiking in his mind. It would just make them confused about their loyalty. Felix left them believing in his victory and ordered them to follow him to the Wrathful Creator's district. Without asking questions, the councilman chased after him while the rest of the Void Nation citizens returned to their duties with an uplifted spirit. Knowing that their king possessed now the true powers of their creator was the greatest moment in their lives since it meant he could finally help them improve their powers. Somewhere in the emptiness realm, Felix and his councilmen stood facing the wrathful creators. These creatures, resembling giant nightmarish insects with massive abdomens and menacing mandibles, skittered and hissed, their presence a palpable threat. There was an army of them consisting of hundreds lined up akin to factory workers. Meanwhile, the void creatures of all sorts of sizes and shapes kept emerging from the bottom of their abdomens. "During your absence, we have managed to increase our family of wrathful creators by 20. Now, we possess close to 90% of the total." Arthur shared with a tint of pride in his voice as he watched the wrathful creators pumping out massive numbers of void creatures each minute. "We have also collected close to 20 billion void creatures in the past 5 decades. Miriam added, "We knew that you would need a massive quantity to use as currency for your wishes after you return. So, we not once stopped or lazed around." "Great job!" Felix praised. He was pleased with their efforts as he indeed desired a massive quantity of emptiness creatures for his upcoming wishes. Still, 20 billion emptiness creatures weren't enough for the kind of vision he had. "Let's pump those numbers a bit, shall we?" Felix remarked calmly as he floated closer to the wrathful creators. Then, he pointed his finger at them and uttered calmly, "Flawless clone symbol." As Felix activated the symbol, the black tattoo on his chest glowed with a sinister dark light and was followed by the emergence of a similar symbol above the wrathful creators. A stream of invisible dark light shot from the symbol, encapsulating the wrathful creators in an ethereal glow. Within moments, a remarkable transformation occurred. Next to the original wrathful creators, exact duplicates began to materialize. These clones were a perfect replica, mirroring every detail of the original, from the terrifying mandibles to the intricate patterns on its abdomen. The recently cloned wrathful creators turned their attention to Felix. With a commanding gesture, Felix directed the clones to begin the breeding process of emptiness creatures. The councilmen and the tenants watched with widened pupils at the recently emerging army of wrathful creators, doubling down the numbers of created emptiness creatures in a matter of seconds. 1616 can't delay it any longer. I have never seen this symbol before. Even Arthur was taken aback. It was understandable as no one truly knew about all of the Paragon of Sin's symbols. Nemo merely had a couple of them unlocked while his awakened version had the majority. Even then, Nemo's alter ego never showed all of his symbols and skills for two reasons. First, Felix had immunities, and second, Lilith had no interest in destroying Felix right from the get-go. So, she hid quite a lot of her symbols, powers, and techniques, which couldn't even be comprehended. Is this symbol better than perfect imitation? I can't imagine having the powers to create perfect clones in hundreds. Candace remarked with a surprised tone. It's neither better nor worse, both have their advantages and limitations. Perfect imitation allows me to imitate the complex powers of much stronger targets. But, I can't imitate more than one target at a time and I lose my powers in the meantime. On the other hand, flawless cloning can be used on lesser complex beings and it can't be used on myself. Felix answered calmly while placing another symbol, but this time above the voidlings, cloning them passively too. Interesting, it's like two faces of the same coin, Arthur replied with a hint of desire. Felix could sense that he wanted to possess this symbol badly due to the spiritual connection he had with them. He wasn't bothered by it as he knew right from the start that Candace, Arthur, and the rest of the Void Nation chose his side and invested in him for the sake of their power UPS. All of them were able to use only one symbol and if it was possible, he had no problem with adding a couple more symbols in their arsenal. As long as the universe didn't consider him abusing his powers, of course. Soon, Felix left the Wrathful Creators district and was guided to the new place, where the councilmen kept the collected void creatures. After they reached the place, Felix raised his eyebrows slightly after noticing that there were close to 100 Void Nation citizens, using powerful sources of life to keep the void creatures floating in a massive circle. 5 decades ago, our little god's authority was lifted off the void creatures and they went nuts for any source of life to devour, Arthur explained the scene before him. We had to do this to keep them in place. Otherwise, they would have started with consuming our empire. It's good that you have kept things under control. Felix nodded for a moment and then instantly appeared next to the astronomical blob of void creatures. He gave it a single look and uttered, "Freeze." The billions of void creatures froze in place almost instantly like knights listening to a royal decree. Then, Felix snapped his finger and everyone involved was teleported back to the Void Nation. Whether it was the councilmen, the void citizens maintaining the void creatures, or the void creatures themselves, everyone got blinked. Good work, you are excused. Felix gave a slight head nod at the stunned void citizens and teleported them back to the city while he remained with the others near the palace. Then, he turned to his councilmen and told them that he would like a moment of privacy. Arthur and the rest didn't dare voice a single word of complaint or questioning, they bowed for a moment and left him to his devices. Are you going to wish for the truth about Nemo? Candace inquired with a soft tone. Yes, I have delayed it enough. Felix nodded. While he seemed relaxed and calm, in reality, Felix was nowhere that. He truly feared from the bottom of his heart to hear that Lilith was bullshit-ing him as always. And that Nemo's soul split was also part of her plan to manipulate him or just to f***ck with him. Doubts swirled in his mind like a tempest, each one a sharp sting of betrayal and uncertainty. Determined to seek the truth, Felix called upon the equal trade symbol. As he focused his intent, the symbol began to materialize above him. Felix spoke firmly into the void, I wish to know if Lilith has told me the truth about Nemo's story of splitting his soul. Yes or no? The words hung in his mind, charged with the weight of his need for clarity. So distrustful. Lilith rolled her eyes at his attempt and continued her sunbathing. Meanwhile, the green fox glowed brighter, its form pulsating as it absorbed the void creatures as a sacrifice. Moments passed, the tension palpable as Felix awaited the verdict. Then, the equal trade symbol pulsed once and stopped its devouring process, a clear and unmistakable signal for the conclusion of the trade. The moment that happened, a genuine smile manifested on Felix's face after the universe delivered its response in his mind, yes. It was direct and simple, yet the realization washed over Felix like a wave, bringing with it an overwhelming sense of relief. In that instant, it felt as if the shattered pieces of his heart, fragmented by betrayal and doubt, began to find their way back to their rightful place. The heaviness that had burdened his soul lifted slightly, replaced by a budding sense of hope and reassurance. Felix lowered his head, a silent thank you to the equal trade symbol, which began to fade, its purpose fulfilled. I knew that little cutie can't be controlled by that witch. Thor smiled. Nemo has always gone against the stream and even attempted to revive you. If he was controlled by Lilith, she wouldn't have wasted this much effort. Lady Sphinx approved, understanding that if Lilith had a vision of the future, then she would have seen that Felix's revival would happen without needing her intervention. Still, it was never bad to be safe against her. Using the universe as a lie detector is something I never thought I would see in my life. Lord Marduk commentated. As long as it works, why not? Elder Kraken chuckled. Are you going to revive him now? Lady Sphinx asked. Yes. Felix nodded. Let's hope it works. The tenants knew that Felix was planning to use a portion of his soul to revive Nemo, so he would completely cut off any relationship he had with Lilith. But, none of them knew if it was going to work. After all, he might come back a different entity due to the soul difference. All I can do is install all of my memories I had with him in the wish and hope that the real Nemo will come back. It was uttered that the origin of a personality was memories, and Felix hoped that it would be enough to restore Nemo's identity. With a resolute breath, Felix materialized a new trade and focused on the symbol above him. He then spoke his wish internally and made sure to put as many details as possible to reduce the failure rate. The moment he finished, the green fox's eyes locked onto Felix, its gaze piercing into the depths of his soul. Then, a piece of Felix's soul began to separate from him, a luminescent wisp that contained the very essence of his life force. It hovered before him, a glowing testament to his willingness to sacrifice for the sake of his friend. Meanwhile, the symbol began consuming the void creatures like there was no tomorrow. Millions were gone in seconds and then billions. The speed was so terrifying, that Felix began to doubt if even those 20 billion void creatures were enough. So, he swiftly decided to put some extra measures by cloning those void creatures by the millions, using an insane amount of void energy to pull it off. Fortunately, Felix had already offered the vessel and the memories, leaving the universe with the least possible amount of work. So, after the symbol consumed 15 billion void creatures, it closed its black hole, and accepted the fragment of Felix's soul, disappearing into its glowing form. In exchange, a new energy began to manifest, a nascent life force that held the promise of Nemo's return. Please work. Felix watched with a mixture of hope and apprehension as the energy slowly took shape, forming a vessel suitable for Nemo's return. When the vessel solidified, it turned into a pitch-black cube. Felix felt a deep connection to it, a bond forged by the piece of himself that now resided within. The equal trade symbol began to fade, its task completed. Felix swiftly teleported next to the cube and held it gently in his palms, staring at it with a hint of love and reminiscing on the day he first found Nemo. The only difference was that now, he could feel a being living within from the first touch. I guess I have to feed him again to help him hatch. Felix smiled. Can you imagine that when he hatches, he emerges as a rat or another animal? Thor laughed. What if he emerged into a human? Lord Loki remarked while scratching his chin thoughtfully. Everyone went radio silent and looked at each other, having a deep sense of dread at the thought of it becoming a reality. The cute Nemo, turning into a human? It was a monstrous thought that sent shivers down their spine. But at the same time, Nemo was created with a part of Felix's soul, so, the possibility wasn't zero. Asna will beat the living sh*t out of him if I restored Nemo to her as a human. Felix sweated a bit. 1617 needing to be fed again. A couple of hours later. Felix could be seen sitting on his throne while fiddling with Nemo's cube in his hand. He had a deep frown on his face like he was faced with an unsolvable puzzle. Why isn't he hatching? He murmured to himself, I have fed him the purest forms of void energy for hours now, it should be even more than the last time he consumed before he hatched. Felix assumed that Nemo would need some energy and he would hatch like the last time. But, no matter how much he pushed into him, it disappeared instantly. The previous time Nemo hatched, he might have already devoured void energy for millions of years to even a billion before you found him. Lady Sphinx shared with a solemn tone, so, you can't use the amount you fed him as an exact measure. You mean he fed that much? I thought since that witch created him for the sake of fooling us, he shouldn't go through the real hatching process. Felix remarked. Felix knew about their original theory of Nemo spending so much time in the heart of the void realm, feeding on the purest forms of void energy for its birth. But, in his eyes, that theory applied only if they assumed that the universe was the one putting him on the map, not Lilith. I am not that sloppy. Lilith broke apart his reasoning with a neutral tone, you might have been fooled, but Asna will notice that Nemo can't be a genuine Unigen if he hatches without a massive reservoir of energy. So, you are saying that Nemo genuinely had absorbed pure void energy for close to a billion years before I found him. Felix felt a cold shudder at the thought. Found him? I was the one putting him in your path when I noticed that he only needed the last shove of energy to hatch. Lilith yawned lazily while creating a mirror before everyone. The scenes displayed in the mirror made everyone feel a tingle of dread in their hearts, especially, for Felix. He watched with his own eyes as Lilith opened a void portal straight into the Royal Pyramid Hall, where there were 10 statues of warriors and the gigantic statue of the kingly guardian, sitting on the throne. She walked in the air with graceful steps until she arrived at the extended palm of the guardian, then, she positioned Nemo in his cube form on top of it. It's a bit too easy like this. Let's make it fun for him. Lilith giggled while using her law powers to manipulate the kingly guardian to protect Nemo until death. The statue seemed to respond, the ethereal light around it pulsating with a newfound purpose. A silent understanding passed between Lilith and the kingly guardian, a pact sealed by the power of her laws. She even hid Nemo's existence, making it impossible for anyone to see him without the right conditions. This should be enough. Lilith walked away with a faint smile towards the void portal, disappearing through it and returning the chamber to its usual dimness. After that, the mirror pinpointed the next scene of Felix's squad heading toward the Shurama's temple with big foolish smiles and eyes glimmering with riches yet to come. Felix watched the whole thing with his lip twitching once in a while. He had assumed that this might be what happened, but getting its confirmation didn't make him feel any better. He couldn't help but remember when half of his body got split by the guardian statue's laser beam. All of this for the sake of Nemo, yet, it spun out that he almost died to fulfill Lilith's dream. At that time, he didn't even know about her existence. You are the worst. Felix didn't even have the proper words to insult her. He, thank you, thank you. Lilith chuckled in enjoyment like she was getting praised. Felix's eyelids twitched in irritation. Ultimately, he decided to ignore her, knowing that nothing good would come out of engaging with her. Now what? 1 billion worth of pure void energy isn't cheap for a wish. Thor mentioned. It will bankrupt me for the next 1,000 years if not more. Felix nodded with a serious look. He understood that the equal trade symbol would not give him a break if he dared wish to awaken Nemo. I am more curious, why does he even need that much? Lady Sphinx narrowed her eyes. The original Nemo possessed the Paragon's core and she had to recreate everything to make him resemble a new Unigen being born. But, this one doesn't have a core and he has already existed before. Logically, he shouldn't require that much. True, maybe he needs less than 30% of what Nemo had absorbed or even lower. Elder Kraken approved. There is only one way to find out. Without bothering to waste his time on speculation, Felix utilized his greed laws again to seek the universe's help. After a proper sacrifice of void creatures, the universe gave him an exact answer since this situation had already occurred before. 10 million years worth of pure void energy. Felix furrowed his eyebrows deeply. It's not a billion years at least, but still, it's too much. Felix still had no plans to use a wish for this as it was way too expensive. I guess I can only be patient. You are thinking of accelerating time in an area while feeding him? Lady Sphinx asked. Yes. Felix nodded. I will travel to the heart of the void realm, where energy is at its purest, and I will leave him in a dimensional pocket connected to it with accelerated time. This was the best and cheapest plan he had at the moment. Plus, since he still needed to tie some loose ends, by the time he finished with them, Nemo would be near hatching. Without wasting time, Felix entered the void realm and closed his eyes to sense the void energy. It took him almost no time to find out the location of the purest area in the void realm. Let's see if this will work. Felix kept his eyes closed and imagined himself transmuting into void energy. A split second later, his body got broken up into a cloud of void energy particles. Laws rule. Felix stated with an elated voice as he swiftly imagined himself manifesting his body in the heart of the void realm. In no time, Felix's body was reconstructed in a primordial nexus, where void energy existed in its purest and most potent state. It was swirling around in thick, gooey streams that defied the laws of physics and reality. It's so condensed. Even Felix was surprised. He always heard about the heart of the void realm, where the void energy was so potent, that even void creatures discovered it difficult to exist in it. Yet, he never thought it would be this condensed. The moment Felix brought out Nemo, the cube began sucking the liquid-like void energy into a tiny black hole. I can't believe he had consumed 1 billion years worth of this kind of pure energy. What a monster. Felix left him be and used his runic spatial manipulation to create a small pocket dimension connected with this place. Then, he jumped inside and pulled Nemo with him, uncaring about the flood of void energy accompanying him. Next, he utilized his illusion domain to accelerate the speed of time to match 10 million years to a year. He could even go for a much better time difference, but he didn't want to affect his illusion domain too much. After all, this kind of pure void energy was capable of disintegrating his illusion domain little by little even if it wasn't as potent as a void domain. As for Unigen's immunity to illusions, the illusion domain would fail to work on Nemo only after he woke up and unlocked his eyes. That's because Unigens weren't immune to illusions in the same sense as having a direct illusion immunity. They simply possessed godlike eyes, resembling Lady Sphinx's truth eyes, which allowed them to see through illusions. The same applied to poison and such effects. They didn't have immunites, but their bodies were resistant to any kind of mortal poison used on them, as they were too weak to affect them. Unigens had perfect immunites only to their laws. This should do it. Felix dusted his hands as he observed Nemo devouring years' worth of void energy in the space of split seconds. Now, let's see what kind of cultivation system I can create and help my race turn a better leaf in the future. Felix smiled, a bit interested in the experiment. 1618 Returning to Earth. Felix now had all the tools and time to help his race establish themselves strongly and collectively in the universe, instead of relying on a couple of powerful beings to carry them. The first thing he did was contact Noah, Olivia, Selfie, Malak, and Bodadai as he needed their help to make his vision clear. He already had a cultivation system in mind, which was considered perfect for humans if he succeeded. Meet me next to Earth. He left them this cryptic message and took off without bothering to explain much. Noah and the rest made their move the moment they received his message. None of them seemed shocked by his sudden return after more than 5 decades. Felix had already informed them before he took Nemo's fight, that he might be gone for a long time and they shouldn't be too concerned. Some time later, Felix, having journeyed through realms and realities far beyond the ordinary scope of existence, was finally returning to a place that, despite its cosmic insignificance, held a deep and personal significance for him, Earth. As Felix approached the solar system, his form, a silhouette against the backdrop of stars and planets, began decelerating. He had traveled as a being of void particles, a formless entity moving through the cosmos, but now, as he neared his destination, he solidified back to form. As Felix gazed upon Earth after eons, the sight of the once vibrant planet now completely enshrouded in ice sent a chill through his heart. The massive, gaping hole in the Pacific Ocean, a dark abyss amidst the frozen expanse, stood as a haunting testament to the changes and turmoil the world had endured because of him. Is it possible to revive 40 billion people with the greed laws? Felix murmured to himself. He came here with plans to return the planet back to its glorious and peaceful days, but he couldn't help but wonder if he could revive all the lives lost in it during that apocalyptic day. It's possible, but only if you are considered a true Unigen. Lilith answered with a faint curious grin, even then, you will be subjected to one of the most gruesome punishments you have experienced. Felix smiled bitterly. He knew that which answered him to see what his decision would be. Would he be selfish enough to ignore remedying his mistake now that he possessed the powers necessary to make it happen, or, he would go for it, uncaring about what would happen to him? As for why he needed to be a Unigen first? Felix knew that wishes' reach and powers were affected by the level of the being. Jin's wishes were the most limited, Nemo came second, and then his alter ego since he possessed the core and was considered an awakened, Lilith was last. In the case of Felix, his wishes were considered on the same level as Nemo's. He possessed the paragon of sin's powers, but he had no control over the core since he wasn't a Unigen yet. So, for such groundbreaking wishes, he needed the right requirements to make the trade with the universe. Even if you could and you want to do it, you should drop the thought from your mind. Elder Kraken advised, reviving 40 billion people? No. Reviving just a couple thousand is enough to warrant Lord Hades' attention. Now, that he is weakened more than ever, he will see it as a sign of disrespect. Lord Hades was a stickler for the rules and reviving anyone without his approval first was extremely disrespectful. This was the reason he punished Lord Quetzalcoatl when he caught him later on. While Felix was close to him, he would not permit him to resurrect that many spirits no matter what he offered him. If it was that easy for him to bend his rules, he would have approved of at least helping Felix's grandfather and family members settle down in the heavenly plane. It's for the best. Felix's expression went cold as he stared above him. Even if there were no penalties, reviving them will do nothing but give my enemies ammo to deal with me. Felix understood that the same scenario would repeat if he revived his loved ones while still having too many powerful enemies lying await. Getting them killed once was already too much. He would never forgive himself if he revived them and they ended up with the same fate because he couldn't protect them. So, he decided to bring them back only after he obtained the necessary strength to protect them from anything. For now, let's fix my home. Felix looked upon the frozen earth, its beauty marred by the gaping maw in the Pacific and the icy sheath that enveloped it. Felix called upon the equal trade symbol. As it materialized, Felix's eyes, reflecting the cold light of distant stars, were resolute as he focused on the symbol above. The energy required for such a planetary restoration was immense, but it wouldn't go past 1 billion void creatures since the planet was a soulless object, which reduced complexity. The symbol accepted the offering even with such distance between it and the void creatures. With a brilliant glow that enveloped Earth, the planet began to respond. Rumble. Rumble. The abyss in the Pacific slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, began to close. The edges of the massive hole shifted, earth and water moving to fill the void that had scarred the planet's face. Simultaneously, the icy sheath that covered the earth started to recede. Glaciers melted, releasing rivers that flowed freely for the first time in millennia. The atmosphere, once thin and fragile, thickened and warmed, clouds forming and bringing the promise of rain. As the planet transformed, Felix watched, a mix of awe and relief in his heart. The void creatures he had given were a small price to pay to see his home, this cradle of life, breathe and thrive once again. The equal trade symbol, its task completed, began to fade, leaving behind a world on the path to recovery. While this was happening, in the austere command center of the Mariana Federation on Mars, a group of leaders huddled around a large holographic display. The room, typically a place of order and control, was suddenly abuzz with confusion and disbelief. As the images and videos of Earth's remarkable recovery beamed onto the screen, showing the once frozen planet blossoming back to life, the leaders were caught completely off guard. Is this some sort of trick? Zazia Everglow demanded, her eyes narrowing as she scrutinized the images. Earth was a frozen wasteland and it has been predicted to last like this for another 1,000 years before the balance returns. How could this possibly happen? Maganda Chief shook his head in shock. This is unprecedented. Look at the atmosphere readings and the oceanic activity. It's as if the planet has been restored overnight. Gabrielle Lotus chimed in, it's nothing short of a miracle. Murmurs of agreement and skepticism rippled through the group as they continued to watch the transformation unfold. The images showed the once gaping abyss in the Pacific closing, the ice retreating, and life returning in a display that defied all their scientific understanding. Contact our teams on the ground immediately, commanded Zazia, her voice a mix of awe and determination. We need eyes and ears on this. Verify the authenticity of these reports, and gather as much data as possible. As the leaders sprang into action, coordinating with their teams and seeking answers, the room was filled with a newfound energy. Despite their initial shock and disbelief, there was an underlying current of excitement and wonder. The possibility that Earth might be rotated again into the capital of the Mariana Federation was a thought that stirred something deep within each of them, especially when the Federation now was in complete control over the entire galaxy. Could it be him? Zazia murmured as images of Felix surfaced in her mind, comprehension such miracles could be related only to him. But soon, she stirred her head with a bitter smile, he has long since been gone. While Felix had returned from death over a long period now, the news wasn't released to the public, only primogenitors and Felix's friends knew about his revival. Whatever caused this, it's a chance to honor his death by turning Earth int. Before she could finish her sentence, the atmosphere in the command center dropped a couple of degrees, causing everyone to feel chills on their back. Is this the new center of operation? Interesting choice of decoration. Suddenly, a familiar laid-back voice resounded in everyone's ears as clear as daylight even when the chamber was noisy. Zazia, Maganda Chief, Gabrielle, Barry, and many other old leaders and new ones went silent and rotated their heads slowly. The moment they made half a circle, Felix came into their line of sight with a familiar humane appearance instead of his demonic one. Whether they were close to Felix before or not, everyone's eyes widened to the limit in utter disbelief and shock. Felix. Maganda Chief stuttered as he pointed a shaky finger in the direction of Felix. It's been a while, Chief. Felix grinned gently, how is little Princess Bird doing? 1619 preparing his parting gifts. The moment Felix finished his question, Chaos erupted in the chamber as everyone rushed towards him while shouting excitedly. Not wanting to have his private space invaded, Felix merely gave them a faint smile and everyone halted in their place against their will. No need for such ruckus, it's not like I have returned from death. Felix chuckled, still possessing some of his sense of humor after all the trauma he went through. Is it really you? Zazia narrowed her eyes at him. The 10 rulers announced your death, and Queen Ai didn't announce anything after you returned. Something doesn't add up. Are you suspecting me for being an imitator? Felix smiled. Zazia didn't confirm it, but her silence was enough. You are as cautious as ever. No wonder Noah kept you in charge of the Federation after he took the Supreme Leader's position. Felix was more pleased than annoyed as this was the appropriate reaction of a natural-born leader. Not wanting to cause trouble and make their lives harder, Felix requested Queen Ai to confirm his identity. Queen Ai confirmed his identity easily by reading his unique ID, which couldn't be replicated, stolen, or changed. It's really you. Only now did Zazia drop her guard and allow her emotions to run amok. Felix wasn't a normal being to her or any other human. He was a legend, the pride of the human race, and some people even considered him as their deity, worshipping him for blessings after his death. So, everyone's reaction was more than understandable. I don't have much time here and I just came by to check on you guys. Felix added with a casual tone, I also fixed Earth, so feel free to move in again and recivilize it. Zazia, I will contact you later on for a mission, be available. Before anyone could react to his insane statement, Felix said his goodbyes and disappeared through a void portal again. After he left, Maganda Chief, Gabrielle, Zazia, and the rest of the leaders kept staring at each other in silence, but everyone's eyes had a hint of crazed excitement. They had no idea if he had died and revived, he was in hiding, trapped, or whatnot. The only thing they cared about was the fact that he had returned. Do we announce it? Did he tell you to announce it? Zazia glared at the leader who suggested this. No. Then, keep it to yourselves. Zazia ordered with a solemn tone, for now, we only have one task and that is restoring civilization on Earth and turning it into the greatest planet in the universe. Zazia had no idea what Felix needed from her as she knew that even before his disappearance, his authority and reach had already surpassed her capabilities by miles. So, all she could do was wait patiently for his call. Some time later, Felix could be seen sitting on top of a ruined metallic skyscraper with green moss and vines growing all over it. Selfie, Olivia, Noah, Bodadai, and Malik were standing next to him, gazing into the distant wasteland of what was once a rowdy capitalistic city of New York. Felix had met with them half an hour ago and gave them some details about his previous journey and how it led him here. He also informed them that he now possessed the powers of the Paragon of Sins and he used them to restore the planet and planned on using them to fix the humans' non-existent cultivation system. I have no idea how you managed to get your hands on such godly powers, but I know that it must have been difficult. Selfie uttered with a soft tone as she gazed at Felix from the side. Felix merely gave a forced smile and remained silent, not wanting to lie to them that he had won his battle. What's your next goal in life? I think you have already reached the peak. Malik said with a tone filled with reverence, no one and nothing can stand before you now. It's true. You are already capable of putting even primogenitors in their place. Olivia agreed with an elated tone, ecstatic for Felix's achievement. Only Noah uttered nothing. Unlike them, his master Fenrir kept him in the loop on many things and this made him understand that Felix's journey was nowhere near its end. It was just about to get tough like never before. All he could do was tighten his fists in helplessness, having no way of assisting Felix in his path after everything he had done for him. Don't beat yourself up, Noah. I don't wish this fate for anyone. Felix smiled kindly at Noah after noticing his emotional instability related to his weakness. With the powers of the Paragon, he could sense everyone's emotions and desires like he was looking into someone's expression. Still, I want to be of some sort of value to you. I don't care if it's dangerous, I am willing to let go of everything and head to the Eternal Kingdom with you to save Asna. Noah said with a hardened tone. Even when Fenrir shared some of the dangers of the Eternal Kingdom, he still desired to follow after Felix and be of his assistance in that foreign land. I appreciate the gesture, but that place isn't made for mortals, unfortunately. Felix shook his head. Your elemental manipulation can be used against you there. As much as Felix valued Noah's grits and bravery, he had no interest in taking him along. He had already dropped the thought of bringing primogenitors with him to be his subordinates. Lilith's confirmation of the three rulers' origin made him understand that his only subordinates and allies were the Void Nation. That's because they were made out of void and 7 sins, making him the sole ruler of them. Even Lord Cow's participation in creating them wouldn't make a difference. But, seeing that Noah was having a difficult time accepting it, Felix said with a serious tone, instead, I have another mission for you and I don't know if you are willing to go for it. Just name it. Noah uttered while giving him a stern look. I want you to enter the spirit realm and help my grandfather reach the heavenly plane safely. You can also help your little sister do the same. Felix said. Noah's pupils enlarged a bit, but how? Even if I entered the spirit realm, I don't know how to locate their spirits. Noah had already thought about doing this for a very long time to save his little sister's spirit, but nothing worked. Entry to the spirit realm was already a barrier on its own, don't even mention finding a specific spirit in its infinite space. Don't worry about that, I have it covered. Felix said, all I need is a yes fro. Yes, I am ready at any moment. Noah replied instantly. I didn't think you would be this eager. Felix chuckled, but hold your horses, you are still the supreme leader and before you head out, your position had to be handed to either a human or a void citizen. I will have it handled. Noah promised. Good. Felix could only shake his head inwardly, he knew that Noah was obsessed with his little sister and would do anything for her. But still, to give up everything he had accomplished and go on a mindless and numbing journey of searching in the spirit realm was too much, even by his standards. This is my gift to you, I wish you won't regret it. Felix planned on leaving one last gift for his friends by using his powers. In the case of Noah, he desired nothing more but to see his sister and Felix decided to give him a path to achieve this impossible goal. Whether he regretted it or not, it wasn't up to him. Soon, Felix turned to look at Selfie and couldn't aid but feel a tingle in his core at the way she was looking at him. It was filled with love, affection, compassion, and loyalty, a look only Asna, Nemo, and his grandfather used to give him. The only difference was that those emotions were one-sided and they would always remain like this. I am sorry Selfie, but it's time to free you from your curse. Felix smiled at her, making her blush shyly. She had no idea that this was the last time she was going to feel like this for Felix. 1620 Creating the ultimate cultivation system. Felix didn't want before to manipulate Selfie's emotions. He saw it as somewhat of a personal invasion, but now that he was planning to leave this universe and had no idea if he would ever return, it was far cruel to leave Selfie in this state. Elves could genuinely love only once in their entire lifetime and that's why they were extremely picky in their love partner and why their birth rate was incredibly low. Felix knew that if he left for the Eternal Kingdom, Selfie's obsession with him would get only worse and worse until it would ruin her life. He considered her as one of his dearest friends and refused to let such a fate befall her. She is a kind girl who deserves to be happy and as far as possible from my life. Felix wasn't even sure if he would make it out of this alive and he had no interest in bringing his friends into his mess anymore. Boss, how are you going to create a new cultivation system for an entire race? Is that even possible? Bodhidai interrupted Felix's thought process. I am also curious. Olivia and the others showed the same amount of interest. They knew that creating a cultivation system wasn't something easy, even the bloodline integration cultivation system was considered unnatural with many limitations. They doubted Felix would create another one similar to the bloodline system since it wouldn't change the fundamental aspect of humans being born without a cultivation system. You will find out soon enough. Felix said calmly, for now, get Zazia on the line and tell her to prepare 100 children with different unlocked affinities and no relation to origin bloodliners. Age? Malik asked. From 12 to 16. You got it. After she left to focus on the task and even participate in it to make sure the best quality of children was brought in, Felix turned to Bodadai, Olivia, and Noah. I will request to run some experiments on you if that's okay. I don't mind. As you wish, boss. All of them agreed at once even when they had no clue what kind of experiment it would be. Without further ado, Felix dusted his palms and blinked himself and everyone to the street at the bottom. Unbothered with the ruins and desolation around him, Felix tapped into his illusion domain and created a functioning laboratory with equipment, tables, chairs, and various essential instruments. Within moments, what had been an empty plot of land amidst the ruins transformed into a state-of-the-art laboratory. It was simple in its design, yet equipped with everything Felix needed for his work. It feels mystical every time I see it. Olivia murmured with an odd tone as she walked into the laboratory with Felix and the others. Stand in one line. Felix requested. When they followed his request, Felix invoked the envy symbol, its glow casting an eerie light around them. As the symbol pulsed with life, Felix extended his hands, and from the ether, ethereal figures began to take shape. Mere outlines at first, gradually gained form and substance, their features meticulously mirroring those of Olivia, Noah, and Bodadai. This. Wow. Selfie and the others were left with astounded and a bit freaked out expressions at the sight of their perfect counterparts standing in front of them with soulless eyes. Are those real clones? Selfie was the first to ask, do they possess the same strength and powers, I mean? Yes. Felix nodded calmly, but don't worry, I left out their souls as I just need your bodies to run my experiments without harming you. Souls. You can even copy their souls. Noah and the others felt a tingle of dread in their heart as they gazed at Felix. When they met Felix earlier, he acted normal and this made them sense comfortable around him just like old times even when they heard about his newly godly powers. But, only now did it finally click in their minds, Felix was already at a godhood level where miracles to him seemed like common occurrences. Sigh. Felix could feel their inner turmoil and all he could do was smile wryly. In his eyes, he would have acted the same if his friend had come along and shown him that he could create a perfect clone of himself, which indirectly removed any sense of uniqueness from him. So, he didn't take it against them and began the experiment by beaming an illuminating white sphere inside a glass container. Selfie was the first to break from her initial shock and alter the subject with a surprised tone, is that what I think it is? A Pandian core. Felix nodded. Pandian core. Olivia tilted her head in confusion, what are you planning to do with it? Are you trying to clone the Pandian's cultivation system? No. Felix smirked, I am preparing to improve it and make it the new human cultivation system. Improve it? How? Bodadai asked with a startled tone. He understood that Pandian's cultivation system was considered almost perfect when compared to many other systems. Perfect in the sense of its design instead of its potential. We all know that Pandians are born with a small core in their abdomen that's capable of absorbing neutral energy. Felix shared, this core helps them enhance their all-rounded strength until it gets harder and harder for it to transfer energy into an adequate strength. Most importantly, it also gives them manipulation to neutral energy, Felix added. If we humans were born with this core, we will get stronger over time and most importantly, we will have manipulation to neutral energy. It will be amazing alright as none of us will request to go through the agony of bloodline integration. Olivia commented, but, where is the improvement? Felix brought out the core from the glass container and controlled it to float in front of his friends' faces. Then, he uttered with a faint grin, now, Imagine if we were able to use the neutral energy manipulation to convert it into elemental energy based on our highest affinities to elements. Hey! You serious? How can that be possible? None of them took the news lightly, as they knew that if Felix managed to pull this off, humans would literally possess the ultimate cultivation system. It was a known fact that humans had access to all elements in the universe within their genes, but they were locked up and only one or a couple were unlocked during their birth with a different rating of affinity. Since there were more than 100 elements, many humans were born with a high affinity to rare elements but could do nothing with them since there weren't beasts with a representing bloodline. So, it was always believed that being born with common or uncommon elements was considered a gift and the opposite was a curse. But with this new cultivation system, natural order would finally be restored and those gifted humans would possess access to powerful elemental manipulations or even dual manipulations. Imagine a human capable of manipulating life, death, radiation, chaos, or even vibration elements. Now imagine 100 trillion or even more of such humans. They would own the universe as a collective race at last. Soon, Olivia and the others woke up from their dreamland after realizing that it sounded great only on paper. How can you achieve this? Possessing elemental manipulation without relation to the primogenitor or the universe making a move personally is impossible. Selphie frowned. She was trying her hardest to see through Felix's method, but she kept failing to discover it. You will see later how it will work. Felix rubbed his chin thoughtfully. For now, I have to discover the best way to make a Pandian's core compatible with our genes. 1621 Creating the ultimate cultivation system. 2. Felix knew that achieving this step was 50% of the work and the rest could be easily handled with a wish. But genetic compatibility wasn't a simple subject. Fortunately, Felix had studied it thoroughly with Lady Sphinx's help during his research period when he was mastering all alchemy fields. What are you going to do? Selphie asked with an intrigued look as she watched him draw blood from the clones. Running a process called genetic mapping to highlight similar sequences between races, Felix responded while placing the blood vials inside the reading consoles. When he pressed start, 3 holographic displays sprang to life, showing a detailed map of Olivia, Noah, and Bodadi's genetic codes. The strands of DNA twirled and twisted in a mesmerizing dance, revealing the secrets of their being. Noah and the others recognized their DNA and the heavy difference between them and Bodadi, but that was the limit of their understanding, unlike Felix, who was able to process every piece of information easily through his wisdom eye. After he finished the reading, he repeated the same process, but this time with a Pandian's DNA. He had almost all races' DNAs, plus other peculiar items and treasures in his spatial cards, knowing that a day would come when he might use them. After he initiated the genetic mapping sequence, he requested Queen AI to highlight specific genes and markers, identifying potential points of compatibility between his friend's DNA and the Pandian's DNA. When Queen AI was done, Felix was slightly surprised to see that both races shared a much better compatibility than he assumed. The opposite was for Bodadi's, as the compatibility wasn't even in the 1% range. It must be due to races originating from mammals. As the analysis progressed, Felix took notes, his expression a mix of concentration and interest. Now, he was looking for commonalities, areas where human DNA might naturally align with the Pandian's ability to create their core at their growth stage. If he managed to find this exact responsible genome sequence, he would be able to genetically modify the future generation of humans to possess the same ability. He also noted areas of potential conflict, where human genes might resist or react adversely to the core's integration. The lab was silent except for the soft hum of machines and the occasional beep of a completed analysis. This can't be it, not this one either, is it? No. Felix worked tirelessly, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and calculations. He knew that he could easily reach out to Lady Sphinx and help him out since she had already considered genetically modifying him with a Pandian's genes. In the end, she chose the Devourer's cultivation system, knowing that it would help him the most with his physical strength. Pandian's core was great, but it would have never given Felix a strength boost of 300 kbf total. As hours slipped into the realm of late night, a particular sequence caught Felix's attention at last. It was a complex chain of genetic information, but within it, Felix saw the rhythm of potential. This is it. It has the details of the process of absorbing, converting, and even storing neutral energy in a way that is both efficient and potent. This sequence appeared to be the blueprint for how Pandians naturally developed their cores. All I see is a bunch of letters, how can you know that? Bodhidai asked with a deep yawn, bored from watching Felix doing nothing but staring at a screen. If you considered our bodies as books and those genetic letters to be instructions, then it's not weird to be able to read them like a language and figure out what each sentence meant and did to us, Felix explained it in easier terms. I see, if that. Stop bothering him, if you are bored, go out and walk. Olivia chided before Bodhidai could add another question. Bodhidai went silent instantly, not wanting to go anywhere in this empty wasteland. Meanwhile, Felix leaned closer, his fingers deftly navigating the 3D model of the genetic sequence. He isolated the chain, examining each twist and turn with a keen eye. There it was, a series of genes that, when expressed in a certain way, initiated the formation of a core. Now, to the interesting part of the experiment. Felix cracked his fingers as he prepared for the procedure to modify the genetics of the clones. His friend's eyes showed a glimmer of anticipation and curiosity as they watched him put the clones inside giant glass pods with a sticky blue liquid. Felix initiated the modification process, his hands steady as he manipulated the equipment to introduce the sequence into their DNA. The lab was filled with a low hum as the machinery worked to splice the genetic key into their very essence, aiming to grant them the ability to absorb and convert neutral energy just like the Pandians. One by one, the monitors showed the progress of the integration. Felix observed with bated breath, his hope a tangible force in the room. Will I succeed in the first attempt? Before this thought could take root in his mind, Olivia was the first to have a soft reaction as her body started twitching inside the pod while her heartbeats accelerated significantly. What's happening? Olivia asked, not enjoying the sight of her clone suffering in her place. Your body has rejected the modification. It fought off the foreign sequence as it would any invasive entity. Felix answered. The monitor displayed a series of rapid fluctuations before stabilizing, and the sequence was ultimately expelled from her system. Olivia's clone returned to her normal state. Next was Noah. The integration proceeded further with him, the sequence weaving into his DNA. But then, an unexpected genetic anomaly triggered a cascade failure. The sequence, incompatible with this anomaly, unraveled, leaving Noah's genetic structure untouched by the intended modifications. As expected, it's your werewolf's genes getting in the way. Your body has already been genetically modified to almost perfection by my master. It's extremely difficult for you to obtain the core. Felix clarified with an understandable tone. I see. Noah seemed a bit disappointed. He understood that Felix had chosen them as his test targets not because he knew they wouldn't refuse him, but because he wished for them to have the same core too. It would be a great boost to their strength, and if he finished the entire cultivation system, it would open up new possibilities. Alas! What about me? Did my body succeed? Bodhidai inquired with a slightly excited tone as he observed his clone make no reaction. Oh, your clone has died already. Felix shattered his hopes and happiness with a casual tone as he had already expected this much to occur. Bodhidai was exited speechless. He did notice his clone's heart stop beating, but he believed that it shouldn't be possible for him to die that easily without sounding even a fart in the process. Did you know this will happen? Yes. Then, why the hell am I even part of this experiment? Can't you tell? Felix gave him a weird look, for collecting anomalies if one ever seems to occur. You monster! Bodhidai felt an urge to cry but had no tears to spill. Is it really necessary? Why does it seem like an attempt to bully him? Selfie chuckled in amusement. As much as I would want it to be that, it's no longer fun to bully him. Felix replied with an easygoing tone, the first thing Master taught me is to always add an unrelated subject to the experiment with close to zero odds of something good coming out of it. Why? Olivia asked. When it comes to genetic manipulation, nothing is set in stone, and even my master has almost got me killed once. Felix said with a serious tone, if the certain isn't certain, then the uncertain might be certain. In other words, a miracle might have occurred and Bodadi's clone could have not just obtained the powers to create a core and handle it, but go beyond and evolve it somehow to give him other sets of powers. That's the beauty of genetics and evolution. No one could truly 100% predict the outcome, and it was always best to keep one's options open for anything. But, in this case, you are useless now. You can leave and assist Malik and Zazia with the children, I need some of them today. Felix shooed away Bodadi while erasing his clone from existence. Bodadi could only leave the laboratory while cursing under his breath. 1622 Creating the ultimate cultivation system. 3. When Felix glanced at Noah and saw him giving him a questioning look, clearly asking him if he should take a hike too, Felix shook his head. I said your condition makes the situation challenging, not impossible. The same applied to Olivia. Felix would never shy from a challenge, especially when the success rate was correlated to the rest of the humans. In other words, if he succeeded in giving his friends the ability to create cores, it would be 10 times easier to do the same for children, whose genetics were still pure. Alas, Felix's confidence in his genetic manipulation ended up falling to the bottom of the barrel after he spent the next 20 hours in a never-ending series of failures. The hell, I can understand Noah's being too difficult to integrate, but even Olivia? I have tried everything I have learned. Felix frowned, is it because they are origin bloodliners? Or is it simply impossible to make such a genetic modification without a core organ from the desired race? What am I missing? Felix recalled that Lady Sphinx was planning to integrate a Pandian's heart within him to ensure the genetics integration for the long run. It was the safest option and also the easiest. But, Felix didn't want to use such a method since he needed the entire cultivation system to work on humans for the next generations to come. With another unnatural heart involved, it would take humans millions of years if not more to evolve into possessing 2 hearts for the sake of the cultivation system. As for Noah and Olivia, it wasn't even an option anymore to surgically add a different heart or another organ. After becoming origin bloodliners, their bodies were considered near the perfect genetic state and any additional body part would be rejected brutally. It must be the origin realm. He considered this part to have a big chance of messing with his plans, but he didn't think it would be this bad. I guess there is no other option left but to rely on the power of sins. Felix decided to take a shortcut, knowing that it might take him years of research if not more if he stayed stubborn about this. After all, he would need to run hundreds to thousands of experiments to land at the exact perfect condition for the integration. While it sounded fun, Felix wasn't in the mood to waste time on this when he had bigger problems awaiting him. So, without hesitation, Felix called upon the equal trade symbol, causing Selfie and the others to raise their eyebrows in surprise at the emerging fox symbol above Felix. He spoke his wish into the void of his consciousness. I crave a new version of the Pandian's genetic sequence responsible over their neutral core. It should be fully compatible with human physiology. This was one of Felix's ace cards in case he failed to integrate the Pandian's genetics. Instead of integrating both races, it was best to wish for an alternative genetic sequence that was befitting of humans, but possessed the same powers as the Pandian's core. The only reason he hadn't done this from the start was the price required. As expected, the universe understands the immense value of the wish and made sure to rob me clean. Felix's eyelids twitched as he sensed the rapid disappearance of the void creatures from a distance. Close to 5 billion of them were gone and the symbol didn't seem close to stopping. Just as Felix was about to bolster the number of void creatures to be safe, the transaction was completed at last, leaving him with barely a couple billion void creatures. But it was worth it. This is it. A new sequence materialized before Felix, a strand of genetic code that shimmered with an otherworldly light. It was similar to the original Pandian sequence but subtly altered, refined through the greed of Sin's power into something new, something uniquely human. Felix reached out, his hand passing through the holographic representation as he downloaded the data into his lab systems. This should work, hopefully, Felix said as he cloned the new DNA sequence with his envy laws and left the rest of the work to the machines. Felix watched intently, his eyes fixed on the monitors that displayed the intricate dance of genetic integration. The clones, still and soulless, were unaware of the profound changes taking place within them. As the minutes passed, the atmosphere in the lab was one of tense anticipation. Felix monitored every fluctuation, every reaction. The data began to come in, and slowly, a picture emerged. The sequence was holding, the modifications were taking root without the immediate rejection or complications that had plagued the previous attempt. The best part? It was working for both Noah and Olivia. The integration has succeeded. Felix shared calmly, the clones should now possess the ability to create their core by absorbing neutral energy. Wait! Just like that? Selfie was startled. Didn't you just say a second ago that it's extremely difficult to achieve it? How could our clones haven't received any mutations or such? Olivia remarked. Even Noah gave Felix a questioning look. Don't bother with the details. Felix waved his hand carelessly, having no plans to go into detail about his Sin's powers, they already dreaded him enough. Your clones haven't received mutations since I have created a new genetic sequence that's more geared for humans and almost unrelated to Pandians. Felix answered this question though. What does that mean? Olivia was still confused. It means humans can have the same powers as Pandians without sharing any of their genetic code. Selfie explained with an astonished look, knowing full well that was something impossible for mortals to achieve. Even nature couldn't do the same without millions of years of having humans born in the right conditions to evolve in that manner. It was yet another unexplainable miracle. Let's run some tests. Not wanting to dive into his subject any deeper, Felix brought out the clones from the pods and cleaned them with a snap of a finger. Then, he ordered them to follow him outside. Everyone left the laboratory and Felix created a new illusionary area, which was rich with neutral energy and had an accelerated time difference. Then, he ordered them to start absorbing neutral energy and form their core, following the known steps belonging to the Pandians. Since no one could copy them, the Pandians had no fear of sharing their cultivation steps in the open. The first step is core budding. It can be created only in areas with a high density of neutral energy. Felix shared as he watched a faint glow begin to emanate from the abdomen of each clone. It was a soft light, yet it held within it the promise of untold power. The neutral energy, drawn from the surrounding space, was being absorbed into their bodies and funneled toward the point where their new cores were beginning to form. Noah, Olivia, and Selfie watched with bated breath, their eyes moving between the two clones. Since time was accelerated, the glow within their clones grew stronger by the second while in reality, the creation of the cores was a delicate process, a balance of absorption, conversion, and containment. If one was too hasty, he would end up failing and restarting all over again. As the seconds passed, the glow from their abdomens stabilized, the light dimming to a gentle shimmer. The core creation was complete. First step completed, now to the serious stuff. Felix didn't even smile at this unprecedented achievement, knowing that the true difficulty lay in making the core respond to the elemental affinities. Something that even Pandians were incapable of doing due to their inability to feel elemental energies. 1623 Creating the ultimate cultivation system. 4. Lord Marduk, have you prepared the requested sentence? Felix inquired. Yes. Lord Marduk replied with a solemn tone, are you sure about this though? If you went for it, it would be the same as declaring war against the three rulers. The war has already been declared before I was born, Felix said coldly. I am more worried that you will be giving them a way to control humans. Thor interjected. One sentence shouldn't be enough to do that. Plus, by the time the new cultivation system spreads far and affects the majority of humans, one of us will be dead, Felix replied. Seeing that Felix had already made up his mind to commit to this plan, the tenants remained silent and watched Lord Marduk pass a new sentence written in Universal Codex language. He even gave him the pronunciation of it too. I don't know if it will succeed or not, but theoretically, it should work. Lord Marduk mentioned, I have followed the exact principle of the Universal Codex to create the technique. Let's find out. Above Felix, the familiar form of the equal trade symbol, the ethereal green fox, materialized. It awaited his command, ready to broker a deal. Felix understood the gravity of this moment. He wasn't just going to create a cultivation system, but he was about to encroach on the three rulers' territory. Felix walked towards the clones and placed both of his index fingers on their foreheads. Then, he slid them from left to right, leaving behind a small string of black letters. It was like he inked their foreheads. Olivia, Selfie, and Noah watched with intrigued looks, having no idea what Felix was doing at the moment. Repeat after me. Felix ordered as he read the sentence with the right pronunciation. The clones repeated word by word mindlessly. Alas, nothing happened. As expected, unless the three rulers gave their blessings, we can't utilize their celestial languages. Felix wasn't surprised. He planned to create a technique using the Universal Codex, which would grant anyone possessing it the technique to convert neutral energy into elemental energy with the high enough affinity. He knew that was more than a possibility since the citizens in the Eternal Kingdoms were doing the same thing. The only difference was that they possessed divine energies and the blessings of the three rulers to use their languages as they saw fit. But in his case, he had neither, which pushed him to rely on his trusty Sin's laws. Well, let's hope this works. With a deep, steadying breath, Felix addressed the symbol, I offer void creatures as a sacrifice to activate the Universal Codex sentence for eternity. The symbol responded, its glow intensifying as it acknowledged the significance of the trade. Felix wasn't sure if the prepared payment was enough for the wish, and to avoid any unfortunate endings, he closed his eyes and used the perfect cloning symbol to remotely multiply the number of void creatures. In such a scenario, Felix could be said to be somewhat abusing his powers and the universe would have slapped him on the wrist. But since he wasn't a Unigen yet, Felix was able to go wild. And so he did. He kept creating millions of void creatures each second while using the infinite void energy as fuel. The tenants watched this scene with wry smiles, feeling like they were watching a glitch in the system live. After more than 10 minutes of non-stop creation of void creatures, until even Felix began to sweat a little, the transaction was finally completed. The universe had delivered. A slow smile crept on Felix's lips as he eyed the inscription brighten up and coming to life, swimming across the clones' foreheads akin to a snake. To bypass the three rulers' authority, the universe is the overlord of everyone and everything. Thor commentated with an odd tone. I am kinda surprised that the price was in the billions range, I assumed it would be more. Candace remarked. It's the opposite, it's quite expensive for something that many citizens in the Eternal Kingdom can also do. Felix replied with a cold tone, the three celestial languages' origin purpose was to be used like this. It's just that we mortals can't even enjoy such a basic right unless it was gifted to us. As seen in the heavenly plane, Duke Humphrey was able to utilize a mixture of the three celestial languages, plus the fuel of divine energy from the necklace to create the blood array. This meant it was never something unique to use elemental techniques as they could be easily written and activated by the Eternal Kingdom's citizens with the right conditions. Meanwhile, the primogenitors had them written on their bodies already and they had no clue how to even read them, which honestly was a clear humiliating joke. So, now the clones should possess the technique to convert energy into elemental energy. Candace asked. Let's find out. Felix relayed the orders of the clones telepathically, making them activate the technique by pronouncing the sentence correctly. The moment they did so, the inscriptions brightened up for a moment before dimming down. Then, the clones began to harness the absorbed neutral energy within their core and began to convert it into either ice or plant energy. Success! Felix's smile widened a bit as he witnessed this scene occurring internally. A second later, both clones released massive torrents of green and dark blue mist around them. It's really working. Wait, how? What did I miss? When his friends saw this, they were left utterly dumbfounded and stunned. They were watching Felix work from A to Z and still had absolutely no freaking clue how he managed to make the clones convert energies, even when they saw him use a universal inscription. Felix. All three turned to Felix with looks of intense desire, making him understand that they wouldn't leave him alone unless he gave them an explanation. The kids will take a bit to arrive, why not? Felix's mood improved after he succeeded without too many hiccups, which was something he genuinely wasn't used to. This made him understand just how vital and broken the Seven Sins powers and especially, the greed laws in such scenarios. Without it, he would not be able to create a compatible sequence and he would have spent decades of his time on another research journey. As for the activation of the inscriptions? Yeah, that was a done case. He had zero chance of achieving it in any other way besides getting the three rulers' blessings or overriding their authority with the Paragon's laws. In other words, Felix didn't take an ounce of credit for any of this. When he explained the situation to his friends, he made it brief and told them it was due to his new godly powers. A couple of hours later, in a vast, illusionary tranquil chamber designed for cultivation and growth, 100 children sat on the ground in a disciplined array of meditation positions. Here, in this sanctum, the children, each a recipient of Felix's groundbreaking genetic modification, were embarking on a journey to explore the depths of their newly granted abilities. Felix didn't have to rely on his equal trade symbol anymore as his envy laws were enough to take it from there. He used them to clone the genetic sequence and implanted it on each child. As the children settled into their meditation, a profound silence enveloped the space, broken only by the gentle rhythm of synchronized breathing. Soon, the air around them began to shimmer with a kaleidoscope of energies. Some children, naturally adept and quick to adapt, showed rapid progress. Around them, wisps of elemental energy sparkled and danced. A boy to the left had a faint flicker of flames curling around his fingers, a sign of his affinity with fire, while a girl nearby was surrounded by a gentle breeze, her affinity with air making her seem as if she were at the center of a silent storm. Others were slower, their bodies and minds carefully adjusting to the new powers within them. It wasn't that easy since they had been preparing from birth to become a bloodliner and now, they were given a completely different cultivation system. High chaos affinity and great talent, interesting little boy. Felix praised with a faint smile as he viewed a green-haired boy at the center of the pack, getting surrounded by disorienting colorful elemental energy that screamed off chaos. He wasn't the only remarkable child around as some displayed the rare ability to transform neutral energy into not just one, but two types of elemental energies. These children were the epitomes of talent and potential, their bodies naturally tuning into the dual affinities that set them apart. One such child had sparks of electricity dancing around one hand while droplets of water orbited the other. You brought some talented kids, no wonder it took you a while. Olivia addressed Malik and Zazia, who were watching this scene with dazed expressions. They had been like this ever since they brought the kids and got modified by Felix. Is this really happening? Will our race finally have a genuine cultivation system? Zazia murmured. Her eyes seemed a bit reddened like she couldn't overcome her emotions. For a serious and strict woman like her, this spoke volumes of just how impacting this historical moment was. I will run a couple more tests, but the results seem promising. Felix ordered, I will be here for the next year, bring me as many kids as you can. The more, the merrier, and don't just choose children of upper echelons. Bring me only those with high affinities regardless of their background. Zazia swiftly shut down her emotions and replied with a solemn tone, I will have it handled. She took this situation with utmost seriousness, knowing that those kids were the future of humanity. Felix could do nothing to the current humans since they had already gone too deep into the bloodline integration system. It was much easier to start anew with the next generation. He knew that he could put the kids in an illusionary world and accelerate the time in it, to expedite the generational evolution, but he dropped the idea. In his eyes, it was best to let nature take its course. Whatever happened in the future wouldn't be up to him, as he had kept his word and utilized his powers to help his race improve. Felix, I have always meant to ask. Selphie reached out to Felix with a curious expression, won't it help them more if you activated a couple more techniques in them? The fact that Felix only had to invest 10 billion void creatures or less to activate a technique made her feel like he could invest more into the cultivation system. It would take some time and effort, but it would make humans much more capable in the future. Felix smiled wryly at her innocence, knowing that she was seeing things from the perspective of elves. There is a reason why the universe fabricated us without a proper cultivation system. Felix shared, humans possess the strongest desires in the universe, and the majority allows those desires to gain control over them. With our insane reproduction speed and potent desires, what do you think would happen if humans possessed the strength to conquer the universe? Selphie felt a chill course down her spine. They will declare war on the Alliance and seek to conquer all territories in the universe. She knew, no, she was certain that humans would attempt to do this, maybe not now, or in the next couple of thousands of years, but it was bound to happen. The instant humans realize that they possess strength far greater than their peers, they wouldn't waste their time with alliances or such and would seek to take everything for themselves. It didn't just have to be all humans, just a couple in the leadership rule, and the rest would be forced to follow along regardless of their own beliefs. That's simply the human's nature. So, for their protection and the universe's protection, it was best to give them just enough to live alongside other races with their heads held high. Felix shook his head, otherwise, it will be the same as giving them nuclear heads and expecting them to be mature enough not to wave it around. Felix uttered that this was for their protection for a reason. He knew that the Alliance wasn't filled with nobodies, and if humans dared to launch a war, it wouldn't end in their favor so easily. After all, there were the Watchers, dragons, the Metal race, and more of such powerful races capable of holding their grounds. So, he refused to doom his race by giving them more power than their pride and ego could handle. This was the sentimental reason, but most importantly, Felix refused to add more techniques because he knew that the three monarchs would gain more control over his race with each additional line of celestial language written on them. One phrase wasn't enough unless the connection between the eternal kingdom and the universe was opened again. In other words, it was some form of security for himself too. 1624 The Parting Gifts. For the next months, as word of the newly developed cultivation system spread like wildfire throughout the territories of the Federation, a tide of excitement and anticipation washed over the populace. Tales of the 100 children who had been the first to receive the groundbreaking genetic modification, and their remarkable abilities to absorb and transform neutral energy into elemental power, fueled the imaginations and ambitions of many. The Federation issued a formal request for more participants, seeking people between the ages of 11 and 21, those who had not yet committed to the traditional bloodline integration system, and those who possessed a natural affinity rating above 75%. This criteria aimed to ensure the pure growth of the cultivation system, focusing on those most likely to benefit from and contribute to this revolutionary advancement. For many, this was more than just an opportunity for their children, it was a chance for their entire lineage to rise to prominence, to be part of a pioneering movement that would shape the future. Thus, parents and guardians looked at their children with new eyes, seeing not just their offspring but the potential heroes and leaders of the coming age. Investments were made, savings spent, and resources pooled as families prepared to send their eligible children to Earth. The planet, once a symbol of desolation and destruction, was now the beacon of humanity's next great leap forward. As the Federation managed the massive influx of applicants, the importance of a controlled and ethical approach to this new power became clear. Guidelines were established, and mentors were appointed, each tasked with ensuring that the cultivation system was a boon to humanity, not a path to its downfall. Felix knew that he could have chosen even bloodliners to obtain the new cultivation system since it was established to be working on both Noah and Olivia, but he rejected the notion. He understood that if he shared that the cultivation system could work on even bloodliners, the planet would be overrun by hundreds of billions of bloodliners from everywhere at once. So, it was best to leave them assuming that it could work only on unawakened children until he left. Time went by and before long, the year was about to finish as only a week was left. Felix visited Zosia's office in the new Federation's temporary headquarters in New York after its demolition. "How is it going?" he asked the moment he emerged from a void rift. Zosia was used to his sudden appearances by now and wasn't too surprised. She gave him a wry smile and said, "They keep coming non-stop by the thousands, we sure give birth like insects." Felix chuckled and said, "That's our primary strength." "At this point, I don't see it that way." Zosia sighed, "You are about to leave and people keep sending their kids even after we halted accepting the recruitment. Close to 5 million children are waiting in the planet's orbit. What do I do about them?" "You can reverse engineer the genetic sequence and find out how to replicate it artificially." Felix smiled, "You already know the correct pronunciation of the technique and how it's written. Are you saying we are allowed to continue the implementation after you leave?" Zosia's eyes widened in surprise. Since Felix never brought up this subject and she had no idea that he was planning to leave forever, she never bothered to think of going over his head and running the process without his involvement. "Yes, I will be gone for a long while and this mission will fall on your shoulders." Felix narrowed his eyes seriously, "Just be careful and take it slow. If bloodliners learned that the cultivation system would work for them too, chaos would befall the Federation." "I understand, I will not lose control," Zosia promised with an assertive tone. Felix went forward and placed his hand over her shoulder, then said with a faint smile, "I trust you with the fate of humanity." Before Zosia could react, Felix broke into harmless particles and disappeared from her office. Having no time to think too much about his words, Zosia returned straight away to work, prioritizing reverse engineering the genetic sequence. When Felix broke into particles, his focus was switched to one of his 7 clones, which was left to hang out with his friends. He used the Rathson's laws to split his body into 7 perfect clones, each with the power of sin. This way, he was able to help as many children as possible across the globe. The total number was believed to have reached more than 100 million children in just 1 year. So, Felix had really put in the work. "Are you planning on leaving the next week?" Selphie asked with a soft tone as she sat in a circle with Felix and the others above a cliff that peeked over the ocean. "I am leaving tomorrow actually," Felix replied. "So soon?" Olivia and the others didn't like the sound of that at all. "I have to," Felix said with a serene tone as he gazed at the still water of the ocean, "I have kept someone dear to me waiting for a long time." He didn't need to bring up her name for everyone to realize that he was addressing Asna. Felix had never told them about her in detail or the woes she was facing. But, everyone was smart enough to figure out that she was in trouble and Felix was seeking to help her out. The fact that even Felix with his demonstrated godly powers seemed serious about it made them understand that the situation wasn't that simple. As long as Felix never brought out the subject, none of them dared to pry into his private life and ask him about it. "Anyhow, I brought you some parting gifts," Felix said, wanting to uplift the mood. "Gifts? Is it something tasty?" Bodadi was the first to brighten up. "It's not food, but something you will like a lot." Felix chuckled as he forwarded a piece of paper to him. "What's this?" "It's 49% shares of my business empire. I don't know what Mr. Igrees is up to, but from last I checked, he has already pushed the empire past the trillion coins mark." Felix chuckled, "He has the remaining 51% shares. You won't need to work a day in your life ever again and can just enjoy free food. This is my dream." Tears welled up in Bodadi's eyes as he envisioned himself lying on a bed with space worm beauties and a never-ending supply of food. I know it is. Felix chuckled, just don't overfeed yourself and die. I promise you, I won't die, Bodadi replied with an assured tone. But, you will get fat. That's a given. Bodadi nodded with a deep creepy grin. Everyone's eyelids twitched. Felix shook his head and ignored this helpless foodie. He turned to Olivia and gave her a gentle smile. Little Oli, I know that your dream was to live in peace with your loved ones, nothing more, nothing else. Unfortunately, that dream proved to be the hardest to achieve even for me. Felix pulled a spatial ring from his finger and pushed it slowly into her index finger. Then, he said, at the moment, all I can bestow upon you is this garden. The moment Olivia glanced at the spatial ring's interior, her breath was stolen away from sheer shock and amazement. It was a pocket dimension nestled within the confines of an expansive spatial ring, stretching for hundreds of kilometers. There lay a breathtaking garden, a veritable den of the cosmos. It became a living tapestry of vibrant colors and ethereal fragrances, where the rarest known and unknown natural treasures flourished in harmonious abundance. Towering trees with luminous leaves whispered ancient secrets, their branches heavy with fruits that shimmered like stars. Exotic flowers bloomed in a kaleidoscope of colors, their petals as delicate as the fabric of reality, releasing scents that could revive the weary and inspire the despondent. Meandering pathways, lined with iridescent moss and gemstone pebbles, invited onlookers into deeper exploration, leading them past crystalline streams and tranquil ponds where mythical creatures played. Here, every plant, every stone, every droplet of dew was a treasure, a marvel of the universe, collected from the farthest reaches of space and time. I can't accept this, this is too much. Olivia swiftly tried to pull away the ring from her finger, but Felix held her hand gently and said, your worth to me can't be measured even with 100 of such gardens. So, please, accept it and tend to it, it will make me happier. Olivia was left at a loss for words as she stared at Felix's eyes. They were as sincere as they could get, which made her tear up a bit, having a strong feeling that this might be the last time she would ever see him. So, she fought against her shyness and hugged him as tightly as possible while sniffling in silence, not saying a single word. Felix showed a little smile as he patted her head like the old times, remembering his youthful days with her and how he always pranked and bullied her, yet, she never left him be alone. She became one of his closest family members and Felix always considered her as his little sister. So, he became genuine when he remarked that the garden was worth tens of empires combined, but was nowhere close to her worth to him. After a short while, Olivia let go of Felix and delivered him a head nod while holding onto the ring, seemingly giving him her word that she would take care of it as her life depended on her. Felix laughed and left her be. He turned to Noah and his chuckle faded away after seeing his serious eager expression. It became enough to tell him that Noah hadn't changed his mind in the past year from his journey to the spirit realm. He is as stubborn as you. Fenrir shook his head, clearly, not too pleased with Noah's decision, but, as his master, he respected his choice and did not get in his way. Guys, please give me and Noah some privacy. Felix requested. 1625 The parting gifts. 2. Without needing to ask them twice, everyone left Felix and Noah alone. Noah eyed Felix with an expression of hopeful anticipation. Give me that look after you hear about your journey. Felix smiled wryly as he beamed a small, intricately crafted device in his hand. It was an elegant creation of silver and crystal, with delicate runes etched into its surface that glowed with a soft, otherworldly light. This is a spiritual compass and it's for you. It's not just a tool but a guide, attuned to the spirits of my grandfather and your little sister. He placed the compass gently in Noah's outstretched hands and said, once activated, it will lead you to them, no matter where they are. When you press the button in the center, it will switch the direction to the heavenly plane. Don't worry, it will turn into a spiritual object the instant it enters the spirit realm. There is such a magical thing. Noah murmured in astonishment as his fingers closed around the compass, feeling the cool metal and the pulse of spiritual energy that resonated from within. Of course, there isn't. I had invested quite a lot to bring this item into existence, Felix replied. He wasn't underplaying it one bit, he had invested at least an entire week of void creatures' creation. Since he could create millions each second, God knows how much he had sacrificed for this device. Fortunately, he had another clone on duty, which was responsible for creating void creatures non-stop. Noah didn't know what he meant by that, but still, he looked up at Felix, a mix of gratitude and determination in his gaze. Thank you, Felix. This means everything to me. Felix nodded, understanding the depth of Noah's desire. I am going to put your spirit as close as possible to your little sister, so the instant you enter the spirit realm, you won't struggle much to find her. But, the same won't be said about my grandfather. I can't put you in and out more than once. So, if you are struggling to keep up the search due to your mental health, just ditch my grandfather and press the button. Felix said with a solemn tone. While Lord Hades wasn't known for breaking the rules, he allowed Felix to do this since he wouldn't be involved personally in the mission. Felix would be the one putting Noah's spirit in the realm, making sure that his memories were maintained, and even when he reached the heavenly plane and sought to return, Felix would be responsible for that too. If Felix ever ended up dead or forgot about him, Noah would stay in the heavenly plane for eternity. Felix had a notion that Noah might remain there to watch over his sister since Lord Hades hadn't permitted him to revive his sister. With a deep breath, Noah gave Felix a solemn look and requested, "Don't put me near my sister, put me near your grandfather." Hey! Felix was surprised. Please, this is the least I can do as a payback for everything you have given me. Noah said, his voice was filled with conviction. Noah, there is no need to feel indebted to me. Felix patted him on the shoulder with a genuine smile, I have always considered you as a family and this is nothing between us. Just focus on your little sis. No. Noah said with a suppressed tone, interrupting Felix, I am confident that nothing will stop me from finding my sister even if it's going to take me millions of years, but, I can't say the same about your grandfather. I would hate myself to the bone if I failed to finish the only task you have entrusted to me. So, please, don't argue with me and just make it happen. I know what I am doing. Whether it was Felix or the tenants, all of them were taken aback by Noah's reaction. They knew that he was a good lad and loyal to those close to him, but still, to go this far while knowing that he was just making the mission a million times harder than it already was. Not many people had this kind of grit and honor. At this point, Felix didn't know what to do. The only reason he brought his grandfather into this matter was to make it easier for Noah to accept his gift, knowing that he was always feeling indebted to him and it ate him alive. In reality, he just wanted him to meet his sister and spend some time with her in the heavenly plane until he finished his matters in the eternal kingdom. As for his grandfather, Felix already had plans to revive him with the others at the very end if all things worked out in his favor. Do I tell him about this? Seeing the look in his eyes, I doubt it will change anything. Felix smiled bitterly. In the end, he decided to respect Noah's wishes, understanding that he was committed to this no matter what he said. Are you ready to do this today? Have you dealt with your private matters? Felix said with a serious tone. Yes, I have told the Watchers King that I am planning to step down from the Supreme Leader's position, so he could take over me. Noah informed, he has agreed to this after hearing that it is your wish. I see, that works out too. Felix nodded in approval. Felix would have preferred humans or a void nation to take the position, but humans weren't at that level of strength yet, and he planned to take his void nation with him. So, it was best to depart it to the Watchers, who were feeling heavily indebted to him after knowing that he was the one responsible for their freedom. All right, you can depart and say your goodbyes to your people, meet me here after 2 hours. No need, I have no one but you guys and my master. Noah replied calmly, I will leave a message to the rest. You sure are in a rush. Felix was speechless. Seeing that Noah was as expressionless as ever, he could only exhale deeply and give him a head nod. All right, let's begin. Felix snapped his finger and Noah fell asleep instantly. As he was falling to the ground, Felix beamed a medical pod underneath him and removed most of his clothes and even his AP bracelet. Noah landed in the sticky liquid with the compass held in his chest. Felix got closer to him and placed a finger on his forehead, then, he used his illusion powers to extract a copy of his memories and put them in a spiritual sphere. It could be seen with only people possessing spiritual vision or such variations. This will be the first time I am testing this symbol, let's see how useful it is. He summoned a purplish symbol with a bear on it above Noah and uttered, out-of-body slumber. The symbol shimmered for a moment before it cast a dim misty light on Noah. In a few moments, Noah's ethereal spirit came out of his body in a white color. Unlike other spirits, which had no facial features, Noah's spirit still resembled him greatly. He looked like he was still in a deep sleep, dreaming about God knows what. 7 Sins laws never fails to amaze me. Thor remarked with an amazed look. They are the most all-rounded laws to possess. Lady Sphinx mentioned, sloth and lust's laws are heavily focused on spiritual and mental aspects. Wrath and pride laws are focused on battles. Gluttony on energy management. Envy and greed laws on any other remaining aspect of life. All of this and Felix had merely scratched the surface of the 7 Sins laws. Felix knew that the moment he woke up Noah, his spirit would return to his body. This symbol was meant to be used on himself since he was the only one able to go about the activation condition. Still, Felix wasn't too bothered as he had still planned for this much. He reached out to Noah's spirit and pushed the memory sphere within his mind while utilizing the greed laws to mimic the effect of Elder Kraken's ultimate ability. After the price was paid, Noah's memories merged with his spirit, which ensured that he wouldn't be a mindless consciousness. Still, Felix didn't allow him to wake up. Next, locating my grandfather's spirit. Felix took a deep breath and used the greed laws again to wish for his location in the spirit realm. The moment he was given the location, he established a void portal leading straight to it regardless of the distance between them. He protected Noah's body and spirit and next emerged in a deserted area of space without a single planet or star nearby. Next, Felix scanned about him using his spiritual vision. The moment he turned around, his expression froze and his heartbeats accelerated rapidly. "Grandpa!" he murmured silently as he eyed a green-colored faceless spirit floating in the nothingness of the spirit realm.